Good day, lovely viewers. Welcome to Magic Bloodline. We have an exciting story lined up for you today. What if Hermione was reborn with all her memories and abilities? Your engagement means the world to us. Like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow and bring you more amazing content. Without wasting any time, let's start. Chapter 1, the second first day Hermione Granger died on a Tuesday. She remembered it clearly, the final curse striking her chest as she threw herself between Harry and the resurgent dark wizard who had emerged in the aftermath of the Second Wizarding War. She remembered the pain blossoming across her ribs, the look of horror on Ron's face, Harry's scream of anguish. She remembered the strange weightless feeling as her consciousness began to fade, the peculiar peace that came with knowing she had, at least, saved her best friend one final time. And then she was breathing again, gasping awake with her heart hammering against her ribs. Hermione bolted upright, hands flying to her chest where the curse had struck. No wound, no pain. Just soft cotton pajamas printed with stars and moons, pajamas she hadn't worn in 20 years. The room swam around her as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Not St. Mungo's. Not the battlefield. Her childhood bedroom. Impossible, she whispered, voice cracking. Her voice, higher, younger. Trembling, she raised her hands before her eyes. Small hands. Child's hands. The calluses from wandwork were gone, as was the thin scar across her right palm from brewing the polyjuice potion in their second year. As was the word, mudblood, that Bellatrix had carved into her forearm. Hermione scrambled out of bed, nearly falling as her body didn't move the way she expected, too short, too light, uncoordinated. She stumbled to the mirror mounted on her wardrobe door and found herself staring at the face of her 11-year-old self, untamable bushy brown hair, slightly too large front teeth that her parents wouldn't let her fix with magic until fourth year, and eyes wide with a confusion that had never belonged on her childhood face. "This can't be happening," she murmured, pressing her palms against her cheeks, feeling the softness of skin that hadn't yet weathered a war. This isn't possible. But it was. Somehow, impossibly, she had been thrown back in time. Or reborn. Or, something else entirely. Her mind, the brilliant, analytical mind that had saved Harry and Ron countless times, spun with theories and possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. Time-turner accident? No, they'd all been destroyed. A complicated charm? No spell existed that could send consciousness backward through decades. A hallucination before death? Too detailed, too consistent, too real. Her gaze drifted to the calendar hanging beside her mirror. July 19, 1991. The day before her Hogwarts letter was meant to arrive. Hermione. "Breakfast is ready, darling." The voice from downstairs sent a physical shock through her system, and Hermione had to grip her bedpost to keep from collapsing. Her mother. Her mother's voice. Her mother, who in Hermione's timeline had died 3 years after the Battle of Hogwarts when Hermione's memory charm proved impossible to fully reverse, leaving Helen Granger with a degenerative magical condition that slowly unraveled her mind. Tears sprang to Hermione's eyes. "Coming, Mom," she called back, surprised again by the childish pitch of her voice. She dressed mechanically in a pair of jeans and a striped t-shirt she vaguely remembered owning, her mind racing. If this was real, and every sensory input suggested it was, then she had been given something beyond price, a second chance. Knowledge of the future. The ability to change things, to save people who had died, to prevent suffering before it began. The implications were staggering, terrifying. Hermione took a deep breath, trying to center herself. First things first. She needed to confirm the date, assess her magical capabilities, and establish whether she'd merely been sent back in time or if she'd actually relived the years between now and then. The distinction was crucial. She focused on the small brass bookend on her shelf, extending her hand toward it. "Wingardium Leviosa," she whispered, making the precise swish and flick motion. The bookend wobbled, then rose unsteadily into the air. Wandless magic. At 11. Magic she hadn't mastered until she was 23. That answered one question: her magical knowledge and abilities had traveled back with her. But it also raised a dozen more. How would this affect her performance at Hogwarts? Would her magical signature be recognizable as unusually developed? Would Dumbledore know? Dumbledore. Alive again. Along with Snape, Lupin, Sirius, Fred, Tonks. Hermione. Her father this time. Your pancakes are getting cold. Sorry, she called back, hastily wiping the tears from her cheeks. Just a minute. She made her way downstairs, each step feeling surreal. The house was exactly as she remembered it from childhood, the faded floral wallpaper her mother had always meant to replace, the scuff on the banister where her father had once dropped a moving box, the family photos lining the wall. There she was at 7, missing her front teeth. At 9, proudly holding a science fair certificate. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, overwhelmed by the wave of memories. In her timeline, this house had been sold when her parents moved to Australia. She'd never seen it again after erasing their memories and sending them away for their protection. There she is. Her father looked up from his newspaper with a smile that made Hermione's heart squeeze painfully in her chest. Richard Granger, with his kind eyes and the reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, alive and well and unaware that in another life, his daughter had erased his memories to save his life. Sleep well, princess. Hermione couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Instead, she crossed the kitchen and threw her arms around him in a fierce hug. Whoa! He chuckled, hugging her back. What's this for? Just because, she managed, her voice muffled against his shoulder. I love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart, he replied, clearly bemused but pleased. Everything all right? She nodded, pulling away and turning to her mother, who was at the stove flipping another pancake. Helen Granger turned with a smile that faltered when she saw Hermione's face. Hermione, dear, you look like you've seen a ghost. Are you feeling unwell? Hermione shook her head, crossing to her mother and hugging her just as tightly. I'm fine, Mum. Just had a strange dream. Her mother's cool hand pressed against her forehead. No fever. Well, sit down and have some breakfast. You look a bit peaky. Hermione took her seat at the kitchen table, trying to act normal while her mind continued to race. She needed to make a plan. If this was truly the day before her Hogwarts letter arrived, then tomorrow would set in motion the events that would shape the next 7 years, and beyond. She had an opportunity that defied imagination, the chance to relive her life with complete knowledge of what was to come. She could save lives. She could prevent the rise of Voldemort. She could spare Harry so much pain. But at what cost? The Time Turner incidents in her 3rd year had taught her that meddling with time could have catastrophic consequences. Even small changes could create ripple effects that altered the future in unpredictable ways. You're awfully quiet this morning, her father observed, folding his newspaper. Nervous about starting at Wickham Abbey in September? Hermione blinked, momentarily confused before remembering. Before Hogwarts, her parents had enrolled her in the prestigious girls' boarding school, which she would never end up attending. A bit, she lied, pushing her pancakes around her plate. You'll do wonderfully, her mother assured her, joining them at the table. The headmistress was so impressed with your entrance exams. Hermione nodded, trying to recall how her 11-year-old self would have responded. Enthusiastically, probably. She'd been so eager to prove herself, so desperate for a place to belong. It'll be a change, she said carefully, but I'm looking forward to it. Her mother beamed with pride. That's my girl. Always ready for a new adventure. If only they knew. Hermione spent the day in a state of heightened awareness, absorbing every detail of her childhood home, watching her parents with an intensity that occasionally made them exchange concerned glances. She'd forgotten so many things, the way her mother hummed while she worked in the garden, how her father's eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, the comfortable silence of the house in the afternoon when they each read their respective books in the living room. Simple pleasures she'd lost in the aftermath of the war. Simple pleasures she'd sacrificed to keep them safe. As evening approached, Hermione grew increasingly anxious. Tomorrow, if her memory was correct, her Hogwarts letter would arrive with the morning post. Her parents would be confused, then skeptical, then fascinated. Professor McGonagall would visit to explain, and Hermione's life would change forever, again. But this time, she wouldn't be the naive, eager child who had embraced the magical world with open arms and no concept of its darker corners. This time, she knew what waited in the Chamber of Secrets, in the Department of Mysteries, in the Forbidden Forest. This time, she knew about Horcruxes and Hallows, about prophecies and the price of war. This time, she had a chance to change it all. She retreated to her bedroom after dinner, pulling out a fresh notebook. If she was going to do this, if she was going to deliberately alter the timeline, she needed to be methodical. She would need to track every change, every consequence. She would need contingency plans for when things inevitably went sideways. First, she made a chronology of critical events, the Philosopher's Stone and Quirrell/Voldemort, the Chamber of Secrets and the Basilisk Sirius's escape and Peter Pettigrew's exposure, the Triwizard Tournament and Voldemort's resurrection, the Department of Mysteries battle, the Half-Blood Prince's book and Dumbledore's death, the Horcrux hunt and the Battle of Hogwarts. Then came the list of lives she might save, starting with those closest to her, Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks. Sirius Black, Albus Dumbledore, Severus Snape, Colin Creevey, Lavender Brown and dozens more who had fallen in the Battle of Hogwarts. Her quill, no, her pen, she corrected herself, still adjusting to being back in the Muggle world, paused over the last name she'd written. Could she really save them all? Should she? The implications of major changes to the timeline were impossible to predict fully. Save one life, lose another. Prevent one tragedy, perhaps enable something worse. Hermione chewed her lower lip, a habit she thought she'd broken years ago. There was also the matter of her own development. Last time, the trials she'd faced alongside Harry and Ron had forged her into the witch she became. The danger and adversity had been crucibles that transformed an insecure, know-it-all child into a confident, capable woman. Without those experiences, who would she become? But then she thought of Harry, 11-year-old Harry, currently enduring his final weeks with the Dursleys before Hagrid would arrive to change his life. Harry, who had never asked for prophecies or lightning scars or the weight of the wizarding world on his shoulders. Harry, who deserved a childhood not overshadowed by death and loss. Her resolve hardened. She would have to be careful, strategic, but she would use this impossible second chance. Not to avoid the challenges that had shaped her, but to better prepare herself and her friends for what lay ahead. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Hermione. Her mother's voice. May I come in? Hermione hastily closed her notebook. Of course, Mom. Helen Granger entered, glancing around the meticulously organized bedroom with a fond smile. I just wanted to check on you before bed. You've seemed different today. Hermione's heartbeat quickened. She'd forgotten how perceptive her mother was. Different how? I'm not sure, exactly. Helen sat on the edge of the bed. Quieter. More thoughtful. Almost like you're seeing everything for the first time. She laughed softly. Or perhaps the last time. The accuracy of her mother's observation nearly undid Hermione's composure. She swallowed hard, fighting back tears. I just realized how quickly things change, she said truthfully. How fast life moves. Her mother studied her with gentle curiosity. That's quite a philosophical position for an 11-year-old. Hermione shrugged, trying to seem more childlike. I read it in a book. Helen didn't seem entirely convinced but didn't press the issue. Well, whatever's on your mind, you know you can always talk to your father and me. I know, Mum, Hermione whispered, thinking of all the things she could never tell them, not now, perhaps not ever. Thank you. Her mother smoothed a wild strand of hair from Hermione's forehead. Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day. If only she knew how true that was. After her mother left, Hermione reopened her notebook and added a final note: protect Mum and Dad, no memory charms this time. She would find another way. She had to. Hermione barely slept that night, her mind buzzing with plans and contingencies. When dawn finally broke, she was already dressed and waiting nervously in the kitchen when her parents came downstairs. "You're up early," her father observed, yawning as he filled the kettle. "Excited about something?" "Just couldn't sleep," Hermione replied, eyes fixed on the mail slot in the front door. The morning progressed with excruciating slowness. Her parents went about their Saturday routine, unaware that today would change their family forever. Hermione pretended to read, the book open but unread in her lap as she listened for the telltale sound of mail being delivered. When it finally came, the soft clatter of envelopes hitting the floor, Hermione had to force herself to remain seated, to let her father collect the post as he always did. Bill, advert," he murmured, flipping through the stack. "Oh, what's this?" "Hermione, there's something for you." Her heart leapt as he handed her the thick parchment envelope, addressed in emerald green ink, Miss H. Granger, the second bedroom 15, Heathview Road, Hampstead, London. Despite knowing exactly what it contained, Hermione's hands trembled as she broke the purple wax seal bearing the Hogwarts crest. She unfolded the letter and began to read aloud, her voice steadier than she felt. "Dear Miss Granger, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." She looked up to find her parents wearing identical expressions of confusion. "Is this some sort of joke?" her mother asked, taking the letter from Hermione's hands to examine it. "Witchcraft and wizardry? It seems very elaborate for a prank," her father said, inspecting the envelope and seal. "Who would go to such trouble?" Hermione remembered this moment from her first life, the bewilderment, then the gradual realization that the letter was genuine. But this time, the conversation was interrupted by a crisp knock at the front door. "That'll be Professor McGonagall," Hermione said without thinking, then immediately bit her tongue. Stupid mistake. Her parents stared at her. "Who?" her father asked. I mean, probably someone to explain the letter," Hermione stammered, inwardly cursing her slip. "Since it's so unusual." Her mother's brow furrowed, but she went to answer the door. Moments later, she returned to the kitchen with a tall, severe-looking woman in an impeccably tailored suit that Hermione knew concealed a wand in its inner pocket. "Mr. and Mrs. Granger," said Professor McGonagall with a slight Scottish accent that sent a wave of emotion through Hermione. "I am Professor Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress of Hogwarts School. I believe you've just received our letter." Her gaze fell on Hermione, and for a terrifying moment, Hermione feared the professor would somehow recognize the 30-year-old mind behind the child's eyes. But McGonagall merely offered a small, reserved smile. "And you must be Hermione. It's a pleasure to meet you." Fighting the urge to throw her arms around her future head of house and mentor, Hermione managed a polite, "It's nice to meet you too, Professor." "I understand you must have questions," McGonagall continued, addressing Hermione's parents. "Perhaps we should sit down." What followed was a carefully choreographed explanation of the magical world, one Hermione had witnessed before but now observed with new appreciation for McGonagall's deft handling of Muggle parents. The professor conjured a small flame in her palm, transformed their teacup into a tortoise, and levitated the sugar bowl, each demonstration eliciting gasps of astonishment from Hermione's parents. "Our daughter is a witch," her father said finally, looking dazed. "Indeed, Mr. Granger. And a promising one, if our detection methods are accurate. Magical children often display signs from an early age. Has Hermione ever caused inexplicable occurrences when frightened or angry?" Her parents exchanged looks. "The books," her mother said softly. "Remember when she was 7 and couldn't reach that encyclopedia on the top shelf? We came in to find all the books floating around the room. And her hair, her father added. When that girl at school cut off one of her curls, and it all grew back overnight. McGonagall nodded approvingly. Classic signs of underage magic. At Hogwarts, Hermione will learn to control these abilities and develop them responsibly. But what about her normal education? Her mother pressed. She's already enrolled at Wickham Abbey for September. I assure you, Mrs. Granger, Hogwarts provides a comprehensive magical education, including fundamental subjects like arithmetic and composition, though with magical applications. Many of our graduates go on to prestigious careers in both magical and, with supplementary education, Muggle, non-magical, fields. Hermione watched her parents processing this information, recognizing the exact moment when academic curiosity began to overcome their initial shock. Her mother, particularly, was leaning forward with increasing interest. And where is this school? How would she get there? Hogwarts is located in Scotland, McGonagall replied. Students travel by train from London at the start of each term. The school year begins on September 1st and ends in late June, with holidays at Christmas and Easter when students may return home. A boarding school, then, her father said, looking troubled. We'd hoped to have her home in the evenings, at least in her first year of secondary. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. I understand your concerns, Mr. Granger. But Hogwarts becomes something of a second family to our students. And there are ways to stay in touch, though I should mention that electronic devices don't function well around concentrated magic. Most students communicate by owl post. Owl post? Her mother echoed weakly. Yes, trained owls carry letters and small packages. Quite efficient, actually. Much faster than your Royal Mail in most cases. Hermione had forgotten this part, the sheer absurdity of explaining wizarding customs to logical, scientifically minded muggles. She watched her parents' faces cycle through disbelief, confusion, and cautious acceptance, remembering how they had eventually embraced the magical world for her sake, even when it must have seemed utterly foreign to them. And the supplies listed here, her father said, examining the second page of the letter. Cauldrons and wands and dragon-hide gloves. Where would we even purchase such things? There is a shopping district in London, hidden from non-magical eyes. I can escort you there next weekend, if you wish, to obtain Hermione's school supplies. Diagon Alley, Hermione said quietly, earning another sharp look from McGonagall. Yes, precisely. You've heard of it? Hermione silently cursed herself for another slip. It was mentioned in the letter, wasn't it? She improvised. Not by name, McGonagall said with a slightly puzzled expression. But yes, Diagon Alley is where we'll go. The conversation continued for another hour, with McGonagall patiently answering the Grangers' increasingly specific questions about curriculum, safety measures, and career prospects for magical graduates. Hermione remained mostly silent, afraid of revealing too much, but her mind was already racing ahead to her first trip to Diagon Alley, and the opportunities it would present. She could purchase additional books beyond her school requirements, preparing for challenges years in advance. She could begin subtly altering the timeline in ways that wouldn't raise suspicion. She could, Hermione. Her mother's voice interrupted her thoughts. Professor McGonagall asked if you have any questions. All three adults were looking at her expectantly. Hermione hesitated, considering what her 11-year-old self would want to know. Will I be behind the other students? She asked, remembering her original fears. Since I didn't grow up knowing about magic. McGonagall's stern features relaxed into something approaching a smile. Not at all, Miss Granger. Many of our finest students come from non-magical families. Everyone begins at the same level, learning the fundamentals of magical theory and practice. Your academic background suggests you'll adapt quickly. Hermione nodded, feigning relief. And the houses you mentioned, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. How exactly are students sorted? There is a traditional ceremony on the first night, McGonagall replied, giving nothing away. The founders created a method to place each student where they would best flourish. I wouldn't worry about it unduly. Easy for her to say, Hermione thought. She wasn't the one potentially facing a telepathic hat with 30 years of future knowledge and adult experiences in her head. Would the sorting hat recognize that she wasn't truly 11? Would it comment on her unusual mental state? Worse, would it place her somewhere other than Gryffindor? The thought sent a chill through her. If she wasn't in Gryffindor with Harry and Ron, how would she protect them? How would she maintain the friendship that had been the foundation of her life? I look forward to seeing which house you'll join, Miss Granger, McGonagall was saying, rising to her feet. Now, shall we plan for next Saturday morning for your Diagon Alley visit? I can meet you at the Leaky Cauldron, the entrance to the Wizarding District, at 10 o'clock. Hermione's parents agreed, still looking somewhat shell-shocked. McGonagall left them with a pamphlet titled Magic in the Family, a guide for non-magical parents, and departed with a promise to answer any further questions by Owl within the week. As soon as the professor had gone, Hermione's parents turned to her with identical expressions of amazement. A witch, her father said faintly. Our daughter is a witch. It's a lot to take in, her mother admitted. But it does explain some things, doesn't it? All those strange occurrences over the years. Hermione nodded, watching them process what was, for them, an earth-shattering revelation. For her, it was the beginning of a carefully orchestrated second chance. Already, things were different. In her first life, McGonagall hadn't visited until several days after the letter arrived, giving Hermione and her parents more time to doubt its authenticity. Small changes already, and she'd barely begun. What are you thinking, sweetheart? Her mother asked, noticing Hermione's contemplative expression. That this is going to be an adventure, she answered truthfully. And that I have a lot to learn. More than they could possibly imagine. The week before their Diagon Alley visit passed in a blur of preparation. Hermione pretended to read introductory books on magic that Professor McGonagall had left, while secretly testing the limits of her returned magical abilities. Her wandless magic was inconsistent, sometimes working perfectly, other times barely producing results, but still far beyond what any normal 11-year-old should be capable of. Her parents, meanwhile, swung between excitement and apprehension. They spent hours reading and rereading the pamphlets McGonagall had provided, debating whether Hogwarts was truly the right choice for their academically gifted daughter. Hermione overheard them late one night, voices drifting up from the kitchen. It's just so far away, her mother was saying. And so, unusual. What if she struggles to adjust? Helen, when has Hermione ever struggled to adjust to anything? Her father countered. Besides, did you see her face when that professor was explaining everything? I haven't seen her that engaged in months. I know, but... Her mother sighed. I worry about her. She's always been different, brilliant, of course, but isolated. The other children have never understood her, her father finished gently. Maybe at this school, with others like her, she'll finally find where she belongs. Hermione pressed her hand against her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. They'd had this same conversation in her first life, and she'd never known. They'd always presented a united, enthusiastic front about her attendance at Hogwarts. She'd never realized how difficult the decision had been for them, how much thought they'd put into her happiness. The guilt she'd carried for years, for gradually growing apart from them, for eventually erasing their memories, intensified. This time would be different, she vowed. This time, she would protect them without sacrificing their relationship. When Saturday finally arrived, Hermione was practically vibrating with anticipation. She dressed carefully in a simple skirt and blouse, trying to appear like a normal excited 11-year-old rather than a woman mentally reviewing 7 years' worth of strategic interventions. Ready, sweetheart? Her father called from downstairs. We should leave now if we want to find this Leaky Cauldron place by 10. Coming. Hermione called back, tucking a small notebook into her purse. She'd made lists of additional books to purchase, potential supplies that might prove useful later, and key information she should discover early. The drive to central London was filled with her parents' nervous chatter, peppered with questions about what they might see. Hermione answered as best she could without revealing too much knowledge, describing Diagon Alley as she imagined an excited 11-year-old might, based on McGonagall's descriptions. The leaky cauldron looked exactly as she remembered, a shabby pub wedged between a bookshop and a record store, unnoticed by the muggles streaming past on either side. Hermione felt a strange tightness in her chest as she pointed it out to her parents, who squinted in confusion until they suddenly seemed to notice it. "That's odd," her mother said, blinking rapidly. "It's like my eyes kept sliding right past it." "Muggle-repelling charms," Hermione explained, then hastily added, "At least, that's what Professor McGonagall called them in her pamphlet." Inside, the pub was dark and somewhat dingy, filled with witches and wizards in an eclectic array of robes. Tom the barkeeper, decades younger than when Hermione had last seen him but still nearly bald, nodded politely as they entered. A few patrons glanced their way, clearly recognizing them as muggles accompanying a new Hogwarts student, a common enough sight in late July and August. Professor McGonagall was waiting near the back, looking slightly less severe in forest green robes rather than her muggle suit. "Ah, the Grangers. Excellent. Follow me, and we'll proceed to Diagon Alley." She led them through the back door to the small courtyard with its nondescript brick wall. Hermione held her breath as McGonagall tapped the specific brick with her wand. Even knowing what to expect, the sight of the bricks rearranging themselves into an archway made her heart skip. And there it was, Diagon Alley, vibrant and untouched by the darkness that would later descend upon it. Colorful shop fronts, witches and wizards in bright robes, the sounds of haggling and laughter, the mingled smells of potion ingredients and freshly baked cauldron cakes. Her parents gasped on either side of her. Hermione allowed herself a genuine smile of wonder, not because the sight was new to her, but because she was seeing it whole and unbroken, before war had dimmed its light. "First, we should visit Gringotts Bank to exchange your muggle currency for wizarding money," McGonagall was explaining, pointing toward the imposing white marble building at the far end of the alley. Gringotts. Where she, Harry, and Ron would one day break in, free a dragon, and destroy part of the building in their escape. Hermione swallowed hard, hoping the goblins couldn't somehow sense her future transgression. As they walked, McGonagall provided a running commentary on the various shops. Hermione half listened, her gaze darting from storefront to storefront, mentally cataloging what had changed, or rather, what would change. Florian Fortescue, alive and waving from his ice cream parlor. Ollivander's, intact and bustling with customers. The magical menagerie, where she would eventually find Crookshanks, though not today, she reminded herself. The wizarding economy uses gold, silver, and bronze coins, McGonagall was telling her parents as they approached Gringotts. Galleons, sickles, and nuts, respectively. The exchange rate fluctuates, but today £1 sterling will get you approximately 2 sickles. Her father was scribbling notes in a small pad, looking both bewildered and fascinated. And these goblins, they run the entire financial system? Indeed. They've been the caretakers of wizarding wealth for centuries. Extremely clever with finances, extremely dangerous if crossed. The interior of Gringotts was as impressive as Hermione remembered, vast marble hall, hundreds of goblins at high desks, the soft clink of coins and scratch of quills. McGonagall guided them to an exchange counter, where her father somewhat nervously handed over several £100. School supplies aren't inexpensive, McGonagall had warned them, particularly the wand, which is a significant investment. But most textbooks can be used for several years, and standard potion ingredients are reasonably priced. With a pouch full of wizarding currency, they emerged back into the sunlight. McGonagall consulted the supply list. "I suggest we begin with the most important item, Miss Granger's wand. Ollivander's is just there." Hermione's heart began to race. Her wand, her first wand, the one she'd used until it was taken by snatchers during their hunt for Horcruxes. 10 3/4 inches, vine wood with a dragon heartstring core. The familiar weight of it in her hand, the warmth as it recognized her as its witch. The bell above Ollivander's door jingled softly as they entered the narrow shop. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams that filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating thousands of narrow boxes stacked from floor to ceiling. The air hummed with latent magic that made the hairs on Hermione's arms stand on end. "Good morning," came the soft voice she remembered. Garrick Ollivander stepped from between the shelves, his silvery eyes gleaming in the dim light. "A new Hogwarts student, I presume?" "Yes, Mr. Ollivander," McGonagall replied. "This is Miss Hermione Granger and her parents." Ollivander's gaze lingered on Hermione with an intensity that made her wonder, yet again, if he could somehow sense her unusual situation. But he merely smiled, a brief twitch of thin lips. "First wand in the family, then." "Fascinating. Always fascinating to match a wand to a new witch or wizard." He produced a measuring tape from his pocket. "Which is your wand arm, Miss Granger?" "Right," Hermione answered, extending it automatically. The tape measure began taking measurements on its own, arm length, wrist to elbow, shoulder to floor, around her head, while Ollivander disappeared among the shelves, muttering to himself. "The wand chooses the witch, Miss Granger," he called over his shoulder. Every Ollivander wand has a core of powerful magical substance, unicorn hair, phoenix feather, or dragon heartstring. No two Ollivander wands are the same, just as no two unicorns, dragons, or phoenixes are the same. He returned with several boxes, waving away the measuring tape. "Let's try this one first. Maple and unicorn hair. 9 inches. Quite whippy." Hermione knew this wasn't her wand, but she took it anyway, giving it an experimental wave. Nothing happened. "No, no, that won't do." Ollivander snatched it back. "Perhaps this, ebony and dragon heartstring, 8.5 inches, springy." Again, nothing. Nor with the third wand, rowan and unicorn hair, nor the fourth, a beautiful but unresponsive cherry and phoenix feather combination. Her parents were beginning to look concerned, but McGonagall assured them, this is quite normal. Finding the right match can take time. Indeed, Ollivander agreed, studying Hermione thoughtfully. A challenging customer. But not to worry, the difficult matches are often the most rewarding. He disappeared again, returning with another box. "Let's see, vine wood and dragon heartstring. 10 3/4 inches. A sophisticated wand for a witch of depth and vision." Hermione's breath caught as he opened the box. There it was, her wand. Slender, elegant, with delicate vine patterns carved into the handle. She reached for it with trembling fingers. The moment she grasped it, warmth flooded up her arm, and a stream of golden sparks shot from the tip, dancing around the dusty shop like miniature fireworks. The sense of homecoming was so overwhelming that tears pricked at her eyes. "Oh, bravo!" Ollivander clapped his hands together. "A perfect match. Vine wands are among the less common types, you know, they seek witches and wizards of unusual vision and purpose, those with a greater plan, a higher ambition." Hermione swallowed hard, wondering if he somehow knew how accurate his description was. "The dragon heartstring," he continued, "produces the most powerful magic, learns quickly, and bonds strongly with its owner. Though." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Such wands have been known to turn to the dark arts if improperly guided. But I sense that will not be a concern with you, Miss Granger." "No, sir," she replied quietly. "It won't." Her mother was looking slightly alarmed at this talk of dark arts, but her father stepped forward to pay the 7 galleons for the wand. Ollivander packaged it carefully, though Hermione was reluctant to let it go even for a moment. "I expect we'll see impressive things from you, Miss Granger," Ollivander said as they prepared to leave. "That wand has chosen a most interesting path." Outside, Hermione clutched the wand box to her chest, feeling more grounded than she had since awakening in her childhood bedroom. Whatever mysterious force had sent her back in time, her wand still recognized her, still chose her. That had to mean something. "Robes next, I think," McGonagall said, consulting the list. "Madame Malkin's is just down this way." The rest of the shopping expedition progressed more smoothly. Hermione was fitted for her school robes while her mother selected a cauldron, scales, and telescope from the adjacent shop. McGonagall helped her father choose standard potion ingredients and explained the purpose of dragonhide gloves, extremely resistant to most caustic substances and minor curses. When they reached Flourish and Blots, Hermione had to feign her first-time excitement while carefully managing her selections. Along with her required textbooks, she chose supplementary reading that would prepare her for challenges still years away: Magical Creatures of Britain and Ireland, Ancient Runes Made Easy, A Guide to Advanced Transfiguration, and most importantly, Magic Most Patenti and Secrets of the Darkest Art, which she slipped into her stack while her parents were distracted by a display of moving photographs. The clerk raised an eyebrow at the last two titles. "Bit advanced for a first year, aren't these?" "They're for my parents," Hermione improvised quickly. "They're dentists, muggle healers, and they're fascinated by magical medicine. I thought these might explain some principles." The clerk looked dubious but rang up the purchases anyway. McGonagall, occupied with showing her parents a set of self-correcting quills, didn't notice the additions to Hermione's growing library. Their last stop was Elop's Owl Emporium, where her parents, to Hermione's surprise, insisted on purchasing a small tawny owl. "For sending letters," her father explained, seeing her startled expression. "We want to hear from you regularly," and the professor mentioned owl post was the normal method. "We can't have our daughter going off to a magical boarding school without a way to keep in touch," her mother added, smiling at the sleepy-looking bird. "What will you name him?" Hermione stroked the owl's soft feathers, touched by her parents' thoughtfulness. In her first life, she hadn't had a pet until Crookshanks in her third year. Another small change to the timeline. Archimedes, she decided, naming him after the owl in her childhood favorite, The Sword in the Stone. Their shopping complete, McGonagall guided them back through the leaky cauldron to Muggle London, where they said their goodbyes. "You'll receive your train ticket by owl within the week," the professor told Hermione. Platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross Station, September 1st. The barrier between platforms 9 and 10 is enchanted, simply walk directly at it, and you'll pass through to the wizarding platform. "Thank you, Professor," Hermione said politely, wondering if she should pretend more confusion about the platform to maintain her cover as a Muggle-born first year. But McGonagall merely nodded, apparently satisfied that her instructions were sufficient. "I look forward to seeing you at Hogwarts, Miss Granger," she said, her stern expression softening slightly. "I believe you'll find it most illuminating." As they drove home, Hermione's parents chattered excitedly about everything they'd seen, while she sat quietly in the back seat, stroking Archimedes through the bars of his cage and mentally revising her plans. She had her wand back. She had books that would help her prepare for the challenges ahead. She had made her first deliberate changes to the timeline. Now she just had to decide how far she was willing to go to reshape the future. The weeks leading up to September 1st passed both too quickly and too slowly for Hermione. By day, she maintained the facade of an excited 11-year-old, practicing simple spells from her first-year textbooks and pretending to be amazed by her success. By night, she pored over the advanced texts she'd smuggled home, refreshing her knowledge of Horcruxes, protective enchantments, and defensive magic. She wrote extensive notes in a coded journal, mapping out the timeline of the next 7 years and identifying critical intervention points. The Chamber of Secrets. The Shrieking Shack. The Department of Mysteries. Moments where small changes might save lives without catastrophically altering the future. But the question that kept her awake most nights was simpler and more immediate: should she befriend Harry and Ron exactly as she had before, or should she approach their relationship differently? In her first life, she'd been desperately lonely for months before the troll incident forged their friendship. She'd been bossy, insufferable in her need to prove herself, alienating nearly everyone with her rigid adherence to rules and obsessive academic perfectionism. She didn't need to be that person again. She could approach Hogwarts with the confidence and social awareness she'd gained over decades, rather than the insecurity of her original 11-year-old self. But would Harry and Ron be drawn to a different Hermione? Would they form the unbreakable bond that had carried them through so many dangers if she didn't start as the annoying know-it-all they reluctantly befriended? As September 1st dawned bright and clear, Hermione still hadn't resolved this dilemma. Her trunk was packed with books, robes, and carefully hidden notes. Archimedes dozed in his cage atop the neatly made bed that she wouldn't sleep in again until Christmas. Her parents were downstairs, making a special breakfast before their drive to King's Cross. Hermione stood before her mirror, studying her reflection. Bushy hair she wouldn't learn to manage for years. Slightly too large front teeth she'd eventually have magically reduced after Malfoy's hex. The face of a child who had no idea what war and loss felt like. "You can do this," she told her reflection firmly. "You've faced worse than starting Hogwarts again." But as she descended the stairs for her last breakfast at home, Hermione wasn't entirely sure that was true. Facing Voldemort had been terrifying, but at least she'd known what to expect. This second chance at life was uncharted territory, filled with ethical dilemmas and impossible choices. Her parents drove her to King's Cross, helping her load her trunk onto a trolley and accompanying her to the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Hermione pretended appropriate nervousness about walking through a seemingly solid wall, for their benefit. "Write to us as soon as you arrive," her mother said, hugging her tightly. "And every week after that. I want to hear everything about this magical school of yours. And be careful with that wand," her father added, his attempt at sternness undermined by the proud smile he couldn't suppress. "No turning anyone into frogs without permission." Hermione laughed, blinking back tears. "I promise. I love you both so much." With final hugs and kisses, she turned toward the barrier, took a deep breath, and pushed her trolley forward. The familiar sensation of passing through the enchanted wall washed over her, and then she was there, platform 9 3/4, with the gleaming scarlet Hogwarts Express billowing steam into the crisp September air. Families crowded the platform, saying goodbyes and giving last-minute advice. Owls hooted, cats meowed, and at least one toad made a bid for freedom as its young owner chased it between trunks and legs. "Gran, I've lost my toad again," came a familiar, despondent voice to her right. Neville Longbottom, shy, forgetful Neville who would one day stand up to Voldemort himself and wield the sword of Gryffindor against Nagini, was searching the ground around his feet while his formidable grandmother sighed in exasperation. "Oh, Neville, not again. That's the third time since we arrived." Hermione hesitated only briefly before approaching them. "Excuse me," she said politely, "but did you lose a pet? I could help you look." Neville looked up, his round face flushed with embarrassment. "It's my toad, Trevor. He keeps getting away." "I'm Hermione Granger," she introduced herself, offering her hand. "First year. And I'm quite good at finding things." "Neville Longbottom," he replied, shaking her hand timidly. "Also first year." Augusta Longbottom surveyed Hermione with shrewd eyes. "That's very kind of you, young lady. Perhaps Neville could use a friend who's organized." Hermione smiled, remembering that this was the boy who would face down Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries, who would lead Dumbledore's army in their darkest hour, who would become her trusted friend and ally. "I'd be happy to help. Let's check the platform first, and then we can look on the train if we don't find him." 20 minutes later, Trevor had been recovered from beneath a bench, Neville's trunk was safely stowed in a compartment, and Hermione had made her first deliberate change to the timeline, befriending Neville Longbottom before either of them set foot in Hogwarts. "Would you like to sit together?" she asked as they boarded the train. "I don't know anyone else yet." Neville's face lit up with relief. "Yes, please. I was worried I'd end up alone." As the train pulled away from the station, Hermione felt a curious blend of nostalgia, anxiety, and determination. This journey was both familiar and entirely new. She watched London give way to suburbs and then countryside, half listening to Neville's nervous chatter about Hogwarts and his grandmother's expectations. "She wanted me to be in Gryffindor, like my parents," he confided, "but I'll probably end up in Hufflepuff. I'm not brave at all." Hermione studied him thoughtfully. "I think bravery shows itself in different ways," she said. "Sometimes the quietest people are the bravest when it really matters." He looked at her doubtfully. "My gran says I need to live up to my father's reputation." The mention of Frank Longbottom, tortured to insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange, sent a pang through Hermione's heart. In her timeline, Neville had lived his whole life in the shadow of his parents' fate. Could she change that? Should she? "I think," she said carefully, "that you'll find your own way to make your family proud." Their conversation was interrupted by the compartment door sliding open to reveal a round-faced witch with a trolley of treats. "Anything from the trolley, dears?" Hermione purchased a selection of sweets, explaining the magical varieties to an imaginary muggle-born self while secretly watching the corridor. Harry and Ron would be on this train. She needed to decide how and when to approach them. Her dilemma was solved sooner than expected when Neville suddenly jumped to his feet. "Trevor's gone again. He must have hopped away when the trolley came by." "We'll find him," Hermione assured him, seeing her opportunity. "Let's check the other compartments." They moved through the train, Neville growing increasingly distressed with each toadless compartment. Hermione directed their search purposefully, knowing exactly which compartment they needed to reach. And there they were, a skinny boy with untidy black hair and taped glasses sitting across from a gangly redhead with dirt on his nose. Harry and Ron, 11 years old, innocent of all that was to come. Harry had not yet faced Voldemort again, had not yet learned of prophecies or Horcruxes or Hallows. Ron had not yet sacrificed himself on a giant chessboard, had not yet stood by Harry through trials that would break most grown wizards. They were just boys. Just children, as they all had been. Hermione's heart constricted painfully in her chest as she slid open the compartment door. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "Neville's lost one," she said, the words achingly familiar. "We've already told him we haven't seen it," said Ron, but Hermione barely heard him. She was staring at Harry, alive, unhurt, unburdened by the weight of being the chosen one. "Oh, are you doing magic?" she said, noticing Ron's wand in his hand and following the script from her first life. "Let's see it, then." Ron looked taken aback. All right." He cleared his throat. "Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow, turn this stupid, fat rat yellow." He waved his wand, but nothing happened. The rat, Pettigrew, Hermione reminded herself with a surge of revulsion, remained grey and fast asleep. "Are you sure that's a real spell?" she asked, softening her tone slightly from her original know-it-all delivery. "I've only tried a few simple ones myself, but they've all worked for me." A small lie, given her actual magical experience, but necessary for the facade. She sat down next to Ron, drew her wand, and performed the same repair spell on Harry's glasses that she had in her first life. The familiar rush of rightness, of things proceeding as they should, steadied her. "That's better, isn't it?" she said, watching Harry's startled expression as he removed his glasses to examine them. "I'm Hermione Granger, by the way, and this is Neville Longbottom." She gestured to Neville, who hovered awkwardly in the doorway. "And you are?" "Ron Weasley," mumbled Ron through a mouthful of chocolate frog. "Harry Potter," said Harry. Hermione allowed herself a moment of genuine reaction, not the starstruck recognition of her first life, but the deep emotion of seeing her best friend alive again after watching him die in her arms. "Are you really?" she said, her voice wavering slightly. "I've read all about you, of course. And lived through it and died for it," she added silently. "You're in modern magical history, the rise and fall of the dark arts, and great wizarding events of the 20th century. Harry looked bemused. Am I? You didn't know. I'd have found out everything I could if it was me, she said, then hesitated. This was where she'd originally launched into a self-important monologue about houses and then flounced away, leaving them with their first negative impression of her. This time, she moderated her approach. It must be strange, learning about yourself from books when you don't remember any of it. Harry's expression shifted from wariness to something more open. Yeah, it is. I didn't know anything about being a wizard until Hagrid told me last month. Really? Hermione asked, genuinely surprised despite her foreknowledge. Nothing at all. Harry shook his head. My aunt and uncle are muggles. They don't like magic much. The understatement of the century, given what she knew about the Dursleys' treatment of him. Hermione felt a renewed surge of protective anger. Well, you won't be behind, she assured him. Loads of people come from muggle families. I do, and I've been reading all our course books to prepare. I can help you catch up, if you like. The offer was sincere, and a significant departure from her original approach of competitive academic superiority. Harry looked relieved, while Ron seemed uncertain whether to be grateful or intimidated by her academic enthusiasm. Do either of you know what house you'll be in? Neville asked, finally gathering the courage to join the conversation. My gran wants me in Gryffindor. Gryffindor's where the brave go, right? Harry asked. Hagrid mentioned it. All my family's been in Gryffindor, said Ron gloomily. I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad, but imagine if they put me in Slytherin. That's where you know who wasn't it? Harry asked. Hermione nodded, carefully considering her response. In her first life, she'd been adamant about Gryffindor being the best house. This time, she took a more measured approach. Each house has its strengths. Gryffindor values bravery, Ravenclaw intelligence, Hufflepuff loyalty, and Slytherin ambition. They say Dumbledore himself was in Gryffindor, though. She checked her watch, the same watch her parents had given her for her 11th birthday, now worn again on a much smaller wrist. We should probably change into our robes soon. We'll be arriving in less than an hour. She stood, then added, would you like to join us in our compartment? There's plenty of room, and we could help each other practice spells before we arrive. It was a deliberate invitation, one she hadn't extended in her original timeline, and she held her breath as Harry and Ron exchanged glances. Yeah, all right, Harry said with a tentative smile. That would be nice. Ron nodded, gathering his scattered sweets. I'm rubbish at spells so far, but I could use the practice. As they collected their belongings and prepared to follow her back to her compartment, Hermione felt the first real sense of hope since awakening in this second life. Small changes already, befriending Neville earlier, approaching Harry and Ron with less arrogance, forming the beginnings of their trio before the troll incident. The foundations of the future were shifting, grain by grain. The question that remained was whether she could control the eventual avalanche. Come on, she said, smiling at her once and future best friends. Let's go find Trevor on the way. As they made their way through the corridor, Hermione glanced out the window at the darkening landscape rushing past. Hogwarts was waiting, unchanged and eternal, its ancient stones holding secrets and dangers only she fully understood. This time would be different, she vowed silently. This time, fewer people would die. This time, they would be prepared. This time, she would make it right. Chapter 2, Calculated Ripples. The Sorting Hat felt heavier than Hermione remembered. As Professor McGonagall placed it on her head, Hermione held her breath, suddenly terrified that this ancient magical artifact would expose her secret to the entire Great Hall. The hat dropped over her eyes, and she felt the familiar strange sensation of another consciousness brushing against her own. Well, whispered a small voice in her ear. What do we have here? Oh my, this is most unusual. Hermione's heart pounded. Please don't say anything aloud, she thought desperately. Fear not, young witch, or perhaps not so young. Your secrets remain between us, the hat murmured. I've existed for over 1,000 years and seen many magical wonders, but a fully formed adult consciousness within a child's body, fascinating. A second chance, is it? Yes, she thought. I need to fix things. Save people. But I need to be in Gryffindor with Harry and Ron to do it properly. Yes, I see it all here, your courage, your sacrifices, the battles yet to come. You've grown beyond the girl I sorted before, haven't you? Such knowledge, such experience. The hat seemed to be rifling through her memories with undisguised interest. Ravenclaw would prize such a mind, you know. And with your plans and ambitions to reshape time itself, Slytherin could help you achieve greatness. Please, Hermione thought again. It has to be Gryffindor. The hat chuckled softly. So determined. So sure of your path. Your courage has been proven beyond doubt, both in your past and your willingness to relive these years to protect others. Very well, Miss Granger, or should I say, Madam Granger, better be Gryffindor. The last word was shouted to the hall. Relief flooded through Hermione as she removed the hat, hands shaking slightly. The Gryffindor table erupted in applause, and she made her way toward it on unsteady legs. As she passed Dumbledore at the high table, she could have sworn his twinkling eyes followed her with unusual intensity. He can't possibly know, she reassured herself, sliding onto the bench. Not yet, anyway. She watched the remaining sortings with a mixture of nostalgia and strategic assessment. Neville took nearly as long with the hat as she had before joining her at Gryffindor table, his face flushed with surprised delight. When Harry's turn came, Hermione held her breath again. Had her changes somehow altered his sorting? But after the expected deliberation, the hat declared him a Gryffindor to thunderous applause. Ron soon followed, and the three boys, Harry, Ron, and Neville, settled around her at the table. Told you we'd all make it, she said, beaming at Neville, who looked as though he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. My Gran will be so pleased, he whispered, still clutching Trevor tightly as if afraid the toad might vanish and ruin his perfect evening. What took so long with you and the hat? Ron asked through a mouthful of roast chicken once the feast had appeared. Thought you'd be a quick sort into Ravenclaw, with all those books you've read. Hermione's smile faltered slightly. The hat considered Ravenclaw, she admitted. But it said I had the heart of a Gryffindor. Lucky for us, Harry said quietly. You're the only one who knew any spells on the train. The simple comment warmed Hermione in a way she hadn't expected. In her first life, her initial weeks at Hogwarts had been desperately lonely, her eagerness to prove herself intellectually alienating virtually everyone. This small change, this earlier connection with the boys who would become her best friends, already felt significant. As the feast progressed, she found herself studying the high table with new eyes. Dumbledore, resplendent in midnight blue robes, seemed so much younger than when she'd last seen him, before his death at Snape's hand. Snape himself sat with his customary scowl, unaware that he would one day die in the shrieking shack, giving his memories to Harry with his final breath. And Quirrell, nervous and twitching, with Voldemort's partial soul fused to the back of his head beneath that purple turban. The sight of him sent a chill down her spine. So much depended on the events surrounding the Philosopher's Stone this year, events she would need to carefully manage to ensure Harry still confronted Quirrell/Voldemort but with less mortal danger. Hermione. Neville's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Are you all right? You looked a bit sick just now. Just nervous excitement, she lied smoothly. It's all a bit overwhelming, isn't it? Percy Weasley, puffed up with the importance of his prefect badge, was now leading the Gryffindor first years to their tower. Hermione fell into step beside Neville, with Harry and Ron just behind them. She listened with half an ear to Percy's pompous explanations of moving staircases and talking portraits, her mind already mapping out her immediate priorities. Tomorrow, classes would begin. She needed to establish her academic abilities without raising too much suspicion, form stronger foundations for her friendships, and begin laying groundwork for the challenges ahead. All while maintaining the facade of a normal, if precocious, 11-year-old witch. One step at a time, she reminded herself. Small, calculated changes first. Hermione's first strategic deviation came during their initial potions lesson. As Snape swept into the dungeon classroom, his black robes billowing dramatically behind him, she steeled herself for what was to come. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began in barely more than a whisper, exactly as she remembered. His dark eyes roved over the silent class, lingering momentarily on Harry. "Potter. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Harry's confusion was evident, but before he could stammer out a response, Hermione leaned toward him and whispered, "Draught of living death." Harry blinked, then answered hesitantly, "The draught of living death, sir." Surprise flickered across Snape's sallow face before his expression hardened. "Correct, though I suspect assistance was involved." His gaze shifted to Hermione briefly before returning to Harry. "Let's try again. Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" Again, Hermione whispered, "Stomach of a goat." "In the stomach of a goat, sir," Harry replied, more confidently this time. Snape's lip curled unpleasantly. "And what is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane?" This time, Harry didn't wait for Hermione's prompt. "They're the same plant, sir. Also called aconite." The class had gone deadly silent, watching the exchange with bated breath. Snape's expression was unreadable as he stared at Harry for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Apparently fame isn't everything," he finally said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "1 point to Gryffindor for adequate preparation, Potter." "And Miss Granger," his dark eyes fixed on Hermione. "If I want you to answer, I will call upon you directly. Is that clear?" "Yes, Professor," she replied evenly, meeting his gaze. The rest of the lesson proceeded much as it had in her original timeline, with Snape criticizing everyone except Malfoy. But there was a crucial difference: Harry had not been publicly humiliated. The seething resentment that had characterized his relationship with Snape from day one had been slightly tempered. As they left the dungeon, Harry turned to her with a mixture of gratitude and bewilderment. "How did you know all those answers?" "I read ahead," she said simply. "Snape has a reputation for targeting Gryffindors, especially on the first day. I thought we should be prepared." "That was brilliant," Ron declared, shaking his head in amazement. "Did you see his face when Harry got them all right? Looked like he'd swallowed a lemon whole." "Just don't expect me to feed you answers in every class," Hermione cautioned, though her tone was light. "You should both start reading ahead too. I can help you organize study schedules if you'd like." To her surprise, Harry nodded thoughtfully. "That might be good, actually. I don't want to give Snape or anyone else a reason to think I don't belong here." This, too, was different. In her original timeline, Harry and Ron had resisted her attempts to involve them in serious studying until much later. Small change, potential ripple effects. Over the following weeks, Hermione carefully balanced her roles: student, friend, and secret guardian of the timeline. In class, she demonstrated enough knowledge to maintain her reputation as the brightest witch of her year without revealing the full extent of her abilities. Outside class, she devoted herself to cementing her friendships earlier and on healthier foundations than before. She helped Harry and Ron with their homework without doing it for them, explaining concepts clearly rather than with the condescending impatience of her first time through Hogwarts. She included Neville in their study sessions, patiently guiding him through potion ingredients and transfiguration theory until his confidence began to grow. And she made a point of being less rigid about rules, still responsible, but willing to bend regulations for good reasons. The changes were subtle but significant. Harry smiled more often. Ron's insecurities about his academic performance lessened as he discovered he could actually understand the material when it was explained properly. Neville stopped dropping things quite so often when his nerves calmed. And Hermione herself found genuine joy in rediscovering the simpler pleasures of Hogwarts before the darkness descended. But as October approached, she faced her first major decision point, the troll incident that had cemented her friendship with Harry and Ron in her original timeline. "Something on your mind?" Harry asked one evening in the common room, looking up from the charms essay she'd been helping him revise. "You've been staring at the same page for 10 minutes. Hermione started. "Just thinking about Halloween," she said, which wasn't entirely untrue. "It's coming up soon." "Fred and George say the feast is amazing," Ron chimed in from his sprawled position on the hearth rug. "Mountains of sweets and special puddings. They're usually full of it, but I believe that part." Hermione managed a smile, but her mind was racing. The troll would be let into the castle on Halloween as a distraction while Quirrell attempted to get past Fluffy to the stone. In her original timeline, she'd been crying in the bathroom after Ron's cruel comment about her having no friends. Harry and Ron had saved her from the troll, and their friendship had been forged in that moment of danger. But that sequence of events seemed unnecessary now. They were already friends. She wasn't the same insufferable know-it-all who had provoked Ron's meanness. And deliberately putting herself in harm's way seemed foolish when she could simply not be in that bathroom. Yet the troll incident had also revealed Snape's suspicious behavior, his leg bitten by Fluffy while checking on the stone, giving them their first clue about what was hidden in the third-floor corridor. Without that information, how would she guide Harry toward the eventual confrontation with Quirrell that needed to happen? "Hermione?" Harry prompted again, looking concerned. "You went away again." She shook herself. "Sorry. Just wondering if we should do something special ourselves, since it's a magical holiday." Ron perked up. "Like what?" "Extra desserts from the kitchen." "I was thinking more like practicing some new spells together," she suggested. "Something a bit more advanced than what we're learning in class." "For fun," she added, seeing Ron's dubious expression. "What kind of spells?" Harry asked. Hermione considered carefully. "Maybe the leglocker curse. Or Flipendo, the knockback jinx. Nothing harmful, just useful defensive magic." "Defensive?" Ron raised an eyebrow. "Expecting trouble, are you?" "Not specifically," she hedged. "But it never hurts to be prepared. Besides, wouldn't it be fun to know spells most first-years don't?" This approach appealed to them, and they agreed to meet in an empty classroom on Halloween afternoon to practice. Hermione invited Neville as well, remembering how Malfoy had targeted him with the leglocker curse in their original first year. When Halloween arrived, Hermione felt a knot of tension in her stomach. She was deliberately changing a significant event in their timeline, and the consequences were impossible to predict fully. But she was convinced that avoiding the troll entirely while still strengthening their friendship and beginning their defensive training was the right choice. The practice session went better than she'd hoped. Harry, with his natural aptitude for defensive magic, mastered the knockback jinx within an hour. Ron struggled initially but managed a decent leglocker curse by the end. Neville, to his own astonishment, produced a perfect finite incantatem to counter the leglocker when Hermione deliberately cast it on a cushion for him to practice on. "That was brilliant, Neville," she exclaimed as the cushion's bound corners separated. Neville flushed with pleasure. "I didn't think I'd get it right the first try." "You're better than you think," Harry told him. "You just need to believe in yourself more." As they headed to the Great Hall for the feast, flushed with success and friendly camaraderie, Hermione felt reasonably confident in her decision. They were bonding without mortal peril, learning useful skills, and she'd avoided putting herself in the path of a mountain troll. The Halloween feast was as spectacular as Ron had predicted, floating jack-o'-lanterns, live bats swooping among the rafters, and mountains of sweets and savories on golden platters. Hermione found herself genuinely enjoying the festivities, almost forgetting the anxiety that had plagued her all day. Until Professor Quirrell burst into the hall, his turban askew and terror on his face. "Troll!" he screamed, exactly as before. "Troll in the dungeons. Thought you ought to know." He collapsed in a dead faint, and the hall erupted into panic. As Dumbledore shot purple firecrackers from his wand to restore order, Hermione felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. Despite her changes, some events were proceeding exactly as before. All students will proceed to their dormitories immediately, Dumbledore announced. Prefects, lead your houses. Teachers will follow me to the dungeons. As Percy began officiously shepherding the Gryffindors, Hermione grabbed Harry in Ron's arms, pulling them close. This is exactly why we were practicing those spells, she whispered urgently. Stay together and keep your wands ready, just in case. You think the troll might get into the tower? Harry asked, eyes wide. No, but better safe than sorry. She hesitated, then added, actually, I just realized, we need to warn someone. The girls' bathrooms. What if there are students who missed the feast and don't know about the troll? It was a calculated risk. She needed to introduce the concept of checking the bathrooms without actually putting herself in one. Ron paled. Like who? Hermione thought quickly. I'm not sure, but I've seen some older Ravenclaw girls skipping meals to study. We should tell a prefect or professor to check. Harry nodded decisively. We'll tell Percy. But Percy, when they reached him in the crowded corridor, was too busy hurting terrified first-years to listen properly. Not now, he snapped. Stick with the group, this is serious. But, Ron began. Move along. Percy ordered, shoving them forward. Hermione bit her lip, feigning indecision. We should just go with the others, she said, knowing they would disagree. And indeed, Harry shook his head. If there really is someone who doesn't know about the troll, they could be in danger, he insisted. We should tell another teacher. McGonagall, Ron suggested. Her office is on the way to Gryffindor Tower. We'll just make a quick detour. This was better than she'd hoped. Instead of charging off to save her themselves, they were sensibly seeking adult help. Hermione nodded eagerly. Yes, perfect. Let's hurry. They slipped away from the Gryffindor line, hurrying down a side passage toward McGonagall's office. But as they rounded a corner, they came face to face with Professor Snape. He stopped abruptly, eyes narrowing at the sight of them. And where do you three think you're going? Students were instructed to return to their dormitories. We were looking for Professor McGonagall, sir, Hermione explained quickly. We realized some students might not know about the troll if they missed the feast, especially in the bathrooms where announcements couldn't be heard. Something flickered in Snape's expression, surprise, perhaps, or grudging approval. A reasonable concern, Miss Granger. However, the professors are already conducting a thorough search of the castle. Return to your dormitory immediately. Yes, sir, they chorused, but as Snape turned to leave, Hermione noticed what she'd been looking for, the slight limp in his gait. He's heading for the third floor, Harry whispered as soon as Snape was out of earshot. Not the dungeons where the troll is supposed to be. And did you see the way he was walking? Ron added. Like he was injured. Hermione feigned thoughtful surprise. That's odd. Why wouldn't he join the other teachers looking for the troll? Harry's eyes lit with suspicion, the same suspicion that had led them to incorrectly believe Snape was after the stone in their original timeline. Remember that three-headed dog on the third floor? Maybe Snape's trying to get past it while everyone's distracted with the troll. But Professor Snape is a teacher, Hermione protested, playing her part. Why would he want to get past the dog? Don't know, Harry admitted. But I'm going to keep an eye on him. They were interrupted by a powerful stench wafting down the corridor, followed by low grunting and the shuffling of enormous feet. The three of them froze as a massive shape loomed at the far end of the passage, 12 feet tall, granite-gray skin, a tiny bald head perched on a boulder-like body. I thought the troll was supposed to be in the dungeons, Ron whispered, face ashen. It must have moved, Harry replied, slowly backing away. We need to get out of here. But before they could retreat, the troll spotted them. With a roar that shook the suits of armor lining the corridor, it charged, massive club raised high. "Split up!" Hermione shouted, diving to one side as the boys scattered in the opposite direction. The troll, momentarily confused, swung wildly, its club smashing into the wall where they'd been standing seconds before. Stone fragments exploded outward, and Hermione felt a sharp pain as one struck her cheek. She scrambled to her feet, wand out, heart pounding. This wasn't supposed to happen, they were supposed to be safely away from the troll's path. "Flipendo!" Harry's voice rang out, and a jet of blue light struck the troll's shoulder. The creature staggered slightly but seemed more annoyed than hurt. It turned toward Harry with another roar. "Harry, run!" Hermione screamed, but the troll was already swinging its club toward him. Ron's voice cut through the chaos, "Locomotor mortis." The leglocker curse hit the troll's tree trunk legs. While it didn't bind them completely, the troll's magic resistance was too strong, the partial effect made the creature stumble, its club missing Harry by inches. Hermione's mind raced. The levitation charm had worked on the troll's club in their original encounter, but she couldn't use it now without revealing knowledge she shouldn't have. Instead, she aimed her wand at the floor beneath the troll. "Aqua eructo," she cried, remembering a second-year spell from charms. Water gushed from her wand, spreading across the stone floor. "Harry! Ron!" The knockback jinx together. "On 3. The boys scrambled to position themselves on either side of the troll, wands raised. 1, 2, 3. "Flipendo," 3 voices shouted in unison. The combined force of their spells struck the troll simultaneously from different angles. Already unsteady on the water-slicked floor, the massive creature lost its balance completely, crashing to the ground with an impact that shook the entire corridor. Its club flew from its hand, clattering against the far wall. "Is it dead?" Ron asked shakily, edging closer. "Just knocked out, I think," Harry replied, breathing hard. Hermione was about to suggest they retreat immediately when running footsteps approached from both ends of the corridor. Within moments, they were surrounded by professors, McGonagall, Snape, and Quirrell, the latter whimpering at the sight of the unconscious troll. "What on earth were you thinking?" McGonagall demanded, cold fury in her voice. "You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory?" Snape bent to examine the troll, giving Harry a swift, piercing look. Hermione noted that he was still favoring his injured leg, though trying to conceal it. "Please, Professor," Hermione began, stepping forward. "We were trying to find you. We realized some students might not know about the troll if they missed the feast, and we thought they could be in danger. We ran into Professor Snape, who told us to return to our dormitory, but then we encountered the troll." McGonagall's lips thinned. "While your concern for others is commendable, Miss Granger, it was extremely foolish to place yourselves in danger rather than alerting a prefect or finding a professor immediately. We tried to tell Percy," Ron protested, "but he wouldn't listen. And we were looking for you, Professor, when we ran into Professor Snape," Harry added. McGonagall surveyed the scene, the unconscious troll, the water-slicked floor, the 3 disheveled but relatively unharmed first years. "How exactly did you manage to overcome a fully grown mountain troll?" she asked, her tone shifting from anger to bewilderment. The 3 exchanged glances. "We've been practicing defensive spells," Hermione admitted. "The knockback jinx and the leglocker curse. We used them together, along with a water spell to make the troll slip." Something like grudging admiration flickered across McGonagall's face. "First years, taking down a mountain troll with basic jinxes and quick thinking." She shook her head in disbelief. "I've never." "Well, I must say you were extremely lucky, but few first years could have taken on a full-grown mountain troll and lived to tell the tale. 5 points, to each of you, for sheer dumb luck and unexpected resourcefulness." "Minerva," Snape interjected softly, his dark eyes never leaving Harry, "perhaps we should investigate how the troll got in before awarding points for recklessness." Indeed, Severus, she agreed. You three, return to Gryffindor Tower immediately. Students are finishing the feast in their houses. As they walked away, Hermione's mind was whirling. The troll incident had still occurred, but with significant differences. They'd faced it together rather than Harry and Ron rescuing her, they'd used spells they'd deliberately practiced rather than stumbling upon a solution, and they'd attempted to find a teacher first rather than charging in alone. Most importantly, they'd demonstrated teamwork and preparation rather than desperate luck. Small changes, rippling outward in ways she couldn't fully predict. That was wicked, Hermione. Ron exclaimed once they were safely back in the Gryffindor common room, surrounded by curious housemates demanding details of their troll encounter. How did you know that water spell? It's not in our first-year books. I found it in the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2 when I was browsing in the library, she explained, which was technically true, if misleading about when she'd first learned it. I thought it might be useful, so I practiced it. Well, it saved our skins, Harry said, rubbing a bruise on his arm where he'd been struck by flying debris. So did those defensive spells we practiced. It's like you knew we'd need them. Hermione's stomach tightened. Just a coincidence, she said lightly. But it proves my point about being prepared, doesn't it? Later, as the common room emptied and the excitement died down, Harry drew her aside. There's something I've been wondering, he said quietly. How did you know to suggest those specific spells today? Out of all the magic we could have practiced. The intensity in his green eyes made her pause. Harry had always been perceptive, even at 11, and she'd forgotten how directly he could ask difficult questions. I read about them in a book on practical defensive magic, she said carefully. They seemed like the most useful ones first years could manage. Why? Harry shrugged, but his expression remained thoughtful. Just curious. Sometimes it's like you know things before they happen. That would be divination, and it's very imprecise magic, she replied with a forced laugh. I just believe in being prepared for possibilities. He seemed to accept this, but the conversation left Hermione unsettled. She would need to be more careful. Harry's intuition had always been sharp, and if he began noticing patterns in her predictions, questions would arise that she couldn't easily answer. The next morning brought another surprise. As they entered the great hall for breakfast, Professor McGonagall intercepted them. Miss Granger, a word, she said briskly. In my office, if you please. Exchanging confused glances with Harry and Ron, Hermione followed McGonagall to her first-floor office, trying to quell her rising anxiety. Had she made a mistake? Revealed too much? Used magic beyond what a first year should know? McGonagall gestured for her to sit, then took her own seat behind the desk. Miss Granger, I've been reviewing the events of last night with some concern. I'm sorry we didn't go straight to our dormitory as instructed, Professor, Hermione began, but McGonagall waved away her apology. That is not my primary concern, though I maintain it was foolish to place yourselves in danger. She fixed Hermione with a penetrating gaze. What interests me is the level of preparation you three demonstrated, particularly you, Miss Granger. The spells you used, while basic, showed unusual foresight for first years barely 2 months into their magical education. Hermione swallowed hard. I've been reading ahead, Professor. And practicing. So I gather. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. Your professors have all remarked on your exceptional abilities, Miss Granger. Professor Flitwick tells me you mastered the levitation charm on your first attempt, with perfect form. Professor Snape, who rarely compliments any student, particularly Gryffindors, has noted your potions are consistently perfect. And now I find you teaching advanced defensive magic to your classmates. They're not really advanced, Professor, Hermione protested weakly. Just second-year spells, mostly. Nevertheless. McGonagall leaned forward, her gaze intensifying. I am considering a special academic program for you, Miss Granger. One that would allow you to study more advanced material at your own pace, under supervision. This was unexpected, nothing like this had happened in her original timeline. Another ripple effect of her changes. "That's very kind, Professor, but I wouldn't want to be separated from my friends," she said carefully. "I'm learning so much just being in regular classes." McGonagall's eyebrows rose slightly. An unusual response from a student of your academic enthusiasm. Most would jump at such an opportunity. Hermione bit her lip, thinking quickly. "It's just. I've never had real friends before coming to Hogwarts," she said, which was true enough. "Working with Harry and Ron and Neville, helping them understand the material, it helps me understand it better too. And I think there's value in learning together, not just learning faster." A smile tugged at McGonagall's lips. "A mature perspective, Miss Granger. Very well, we shall maintain your current schedule for now." She paused, then added more gently, "But my door is always open should you wish for additional challenges. I believe you have potential beyond what our standard curriculum might fulfill." "Thank you, Professor," Hermione said, relief washing through her. As she left McGonagall's office, Hermione realized she'd narrowly avoided a significant deviation from her planned timeline. Being placed in an advanced program would have separated her from Harry and Ron at crucial moments, potentially preventing her from guiding them through the challenges ahead. It was a reminder that even well-intentioned changes could have unforeseen consequences. November brought the first Quidditch match of the season, Gryffindor vs. Slytherin, and with it, Hermione's next major decision point. In her original timeline, Snape had refereed Harry's second match, but the first had featured Quirrell's attempt to jinx Harry's broom. Hermione had set fire to Snape's robes, believing him to be the culprit, when he had actually been performing a counter-curse. This time, armed with the truth, she faced a dilemma: should she allow the broom-jinxing incident to unfold as before, intervening differently? Or should she try to prevent it entirely? Preventing it would mean Harry wouldn't experience the danger, but also wouldn't have the early warning that someone at Hogwarts wanted him harmed. That knowledge had been crucial to their vigilance throughout the year. In the end, she decided on a middle path: allow the incident to occur but handle it differently. The morning of the match, she pulled Harry aside in the common room. "Harry, I've been reading about Quidditch safety," she began, trying to sound casually concerned rather than suspiciously specific. "Did you know that sometimes objects like brooms can be jinxed during matches?" Harry frowned. "Jinxed? You mean like tampered with to make them malfunction?" "Exactly. It's rare, but it has happened. The book mentioned that counter-jinxes have to be maintained with continuous eye contact, and so do the harmful jinxes themselves." She held his gaze meaningfully. "Just, if anything unusual happens during the match, remember that. The person casting a spell, good or bad, has to maintain eye contact without interruption." "You think someone might try to jinx my broom?" Harry asked, looking skeptical but concerned. Hermione shrugged, trying to appear less certain than she felt. "Probably not. But after the troll, I'm just being cautious. Promise you'll be careful?" "I promise," he said, squeezing her hand briefly. "Thanks for looking out for me, Hermione." During the match, events unfolded much as they had in her original timeline. Harry's Nimbus 2000 began bucking violently, attempting to throw him off high above the pitch. The crowd gasped in horror as he clung desperately to the wildly jerking broomstick. From her position in the stands with Ron and Neville, Hermione raised her binoculars, scanning the teachers' section. There was Quirrell, eyes fixed on Harry, muttering continuously under his breath. And beside him, Snape, also maintaining unbroken eye contact, countering the jinx with his own incantations. "It's Snape!" Ron exclaimed, peering through binoculars she'd handed him. "Look, he's not blinking, and he's muttering something." "Or he could be performing a counter-jinx," Hermione countered, making a show of thinking it through. "Someone's definitely jinxing the broom, but we don't know who's casting what." "Well, we need to do something," Ron insisted. Hermione hesitated, then nodded decisively. "We need to break the eye contact of everyone who might be involved. I've got an idea." Keep watching Harry. She darted through the stands, making her way around to the teachers' section. But instead of setting fire to Snape's robes as she had originally, she created a distraction that affected multiple professors simultaneously. Drawing her wand, she pointed it at the support beam beneath the teacher's stand. "Ibublio," she whispered, casting a charm that filled the area with large, iridescent bubbles that expanded rapidly, obscuring vision and causing momentary confusion. The effect was immediate. Quirrell spluttered as bubbles engulfed him, breaking his concentration and therefore his jinx. Snape and several other professors were similarly distracted, but it didn't matter now that Quirrell's spell was broken. Above the pitch, Harry's broom stabilized, and he quickly regained control. Hermione slipped away before anyone could identify her as the source of the bubbles, returning to Ron and Neville just in time to see Harry make a spectacular dive that ended with him nearly swallowing the snitch, exactly as he had in the original timeline. The Gryffindor section erupted in wild cheers. Harry was hoisted onto the shoulders of his teammates, beaming with triumph, apparently having forgotten the terrifying moments when his broom had tried to buck him off. But later, in Hagrid's hut where they'd gone to celebrate, Harry brought it up again. "Someone tried to kill me out there," he said flatly, warming his hands around a mug of Hagrid's strong tea. "Rubbish," Hagrid replied, though he looked troubled. "Why would anyone try and do something like that?" "I think it was Snape," Ron declared. "Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering, wouldn't take his eyes off you." "Or performing a counter-curse," Hermione interjected quietly. "Remember what I told you this morning, Harry? About eye contact being necessary for both jinxes and counter-jinxes?" Harry nodded slowly. "So you think Snape was trying to save me, not hurt me? But who else would want to jinx my broom?" An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by Fong's heavy breathing as the boarhound rested his massive head on Harry's knee. "I don't know why anyone would try to hurt ya, Harry," Hagrid said finally, avoiding their eyes as he poured more tea. "But I'm sure Professor Snape wouldn't. He's a Hogwarts teacher, for Merlin's sake." "I know he hates me," Harry persisted, "but even if he wasn't the one jinxing my broom, he's still up to something. He got bitten by that three-headed dog on Halloween. We saw him limping." Hagrid's teapot clattered against the table. "How do you know about Fluffy?" "Fluffy?" Ron echoed incredulously. "Yeah, he's mine, bought him off a Greek chappie I met in a pub last year. Lent him to Dumbledore to guard the—" Hagrid caught himself, looking horrified. "Yes?" Harry prompted eagerly. "No more questions." Hagrid blustered. "That's top secret, that is. But Snape's trying to steal it, whatever it is." Ron insisted. "Professor Snape is one of the teachers protecting it," Hagrid countered, unwittingly confirming there was indeed something valuable being guarded. "He's not about to steal it. So there are other things protecting the, whatever it is, besides Fluffy?" Hermione asked innocently, already knowing the answer. Hagrid looked like he regretted saying anything. "Oh, course there are. Enchantments from all the teachers. Waste of time, if ya ask me. No one can get past Fluffy. No one knows how, except me and Dumbledore." The conversation continued, with Hagrid eventually letting slip about Nicholas Flamel, just as he had in their original timeline. As they walked back to the castle, Harry was deep in thought. Nicholas Flamel, he mused. Why does that name sound familiar? "We'll have to research it," Hermione said. "I'm sure I've read it somewhere." "Library tomorrow?" Harry suggested, and both Ron and Hermione nodded. As they reached the castle entrance, Harry hung back, letting Ron go ahead. "Hermione," he said quietly, "thanks for the warning this morning. About the jinxing. It's like you knew something might happen." Hermione's heart skipped a beat. "Just being cautious," she replied, avoiding his eyes. "After the troll, it seemed like we should be prepared for anything." Harry studied her for a long moment. "You're different from the other first years," he said finally. "Not just smarter. It's like, you've seen more. I read a lot, she said weakly. Books can take you to all sorts of places. He didn't look entirely convinced but didn't press further. As they entered the warm light of the castle, Hermione's mind was racing again. Harry's intuition and perception were proving to be both a blessing and a challenge. She needed him to trust her guidance without questioning too deeply how she came by her knowledge. Meanwhile, the timeline continued to shift in subtle but significant ways. The foundation of their friendship was stronger, built on mutual respect rather than a rescue. Their investigation into the Philosopher's Stone was proceeding as before, but with a more collaborative approach. And most importantly, they were developing skills and awareness that would serve them well in the challenges to come. But as Hermione lay awake that night, staring at the canopy of her four-poster bed, she couldn't shake a growing concern. Some events seemed determined to occur despite her interventions: the troll, the broom jinxing, Fluffy guarding the stone. What if other, more terrible events were similarly fixed points in time? What if, despite her best efforts, she couldn't save everyone she hoped to? One step at a time, she whispered to herself in the darkness. Small, calculated ripples first. She would just have to hope those ripples didn't eventually become a tidal wave beyond her control. As November faded into December, snow blanketed the Hogwarts grounds, transforming the castle into a winter wonderland that still took Hermione's breath away despite having seen it many times before. With Christmas approaching, she faced another decision. In her original timeline, she had gone home for the holidays while Harry and Ron stayed at Hogwarts, discovering the Mirror of Erised and receiving Harry's father's invisibility cloak. Those events were significant, particularly Harry's experience with the mirror, which would prove crucial when facing Quirrell in the final chamber guarding the stone. But Hermione also desperately wanted more time with her parents, knowing what would eventually happen to them in the original timeline. In the end, she compromised. After ensuring Harry would sign up to stay at Hogwarts as before, she approached Professor McGonagall with a request. "I was wondering, Professor," she asked after Transfiguration class one day, "if it would be possible to spend part of the holiday at home and part at Hogwarts. My parents are traveling for work after Christmas Day, and I thought I might return to school early rather than accompany them." McGonagall considered the request unusual, but not unprecedented. "You would need to arrange private transportation back to Hogsmeade, as the Hogwarts Express won't run again until term begins." "My parents could drive me to London," Hermione suggested. "Is there a way for me to reach Hogsmeade from there?" "The Floo network would be simplest. I can arrange for you to use the connection at the Leaky Cauldron, with arrival in my office." "Would December 27th suit?" Hermione nodded eagerly. "That would be perfect, Professor. Thank you." This arrangement would give her precious time with her parents while still allowing her to be present for Harry's discovery of both the mirror and his cloak. More importantly, it would let her guide their research into Nicholas Flamel, which had stalled for weeks in their original timeline. Before leaving for the holidays, Hermione made sure to plant seeds for their future investigations. During a study session in the library, she accidentally left open a book mentioning Flamel as a noted alchemist, though without specific reference to the Philosopher's Stone. She also casually mentioned to Harry that the third-floor corridor might contain multiple protections beyond Fluffy, suggesting that each teacher would have contributed something aligned with their specialty. So there'd be something from Snape, probably potions-related, Harry reasoned, following her lead. And maybe something with plants from Professor Sprout. And almost certainly something from Professor Flitwick involving charms, Hermione added. Professor McGonagall would likely use transfiguration. "What about Quirrell?" Ron asked, scratching his nose with his quill. "What would the defense teacher contribute?" Hermione hesitated, remembering the troll in the stone's chambers. "Perhaps a creature of some kind? He seems to know about dangerous magical beasts." This speculation, which she presented as mere guesswork, would prepare them for the challenges ahead while making their eventual success seem less implausible. It was a delicate balance, providing enough guidance to ensure they could still defeat Quirrell when the time came, without making her foreknowledge too obvious. Christmas at home was bittersweet. Hermione found herself cataloging every detail of her parents' holiday traditions, her father's insistence on wearing a paper crown throughout Christmas dinner, her mother's collection of hand-blown glass ornaments, the way they always opened one gift each on Christmas Eve. Details she had forgotten in her original timeline, erased by time and trauma. She took photographs constantly, explaining to her bemused parents that she wanted to remember everything while away at school. She engaged them in long conversations about their childhoods, their work, their hopes and dreams, trying to preserve as much of them as she could in her memory. "You seem different since starting at Hogwarts," her mother observed on Christmas night as they sat by the fire, Hermione curled against her side like she hadn't done in years, in her original timeline. "More mature. More. I don't know, present, somehow." "Magic does that to you," Hermione replied softly, knowing it wasn't magic but the weight of years and loss that her mother was sensing. "Are you happy there? Truly?" Hermione thought of Harry and Ron, young and unmarked by the horrors they would face. Of Hogwarts, intact and peaceful before Voldemort's return. Of the precious second chance she'd been given. "Yes," she said truthfully. "I've found where I belong. And I've made real friends, the first I've ever had." Her mother stroked her hair gently. "Then we're happy too, even if we miss you terribly." 2 days later, Hermione returned to a nearly empty Hogwarts, arriving via Flo in McGonagall's office in a whirl of green flames. The professor greeted her with a rare smile. "Welcome back, Miss Granger. I must say, it's refreshing to see a student eager to return to their studies." "Thank you for arranging the Flo connection, Professor," Hermione said, brushing soot from her robes. "Are Harry and Ron still here?" "Indeed. Last I saw, they were in the Great Hall playing wizard chess, though Mr. Weasley appears to be doing most of the playing while Mr. Potter's pieces are systematically destroyed." Hermione found them exactly where McGonagall had indicated, Ron gleefully directing his queen to smash Harry's last night. They looked up in surprise as she approached. "Hermione!" Harry exclaimed. "I thought you weren't coming back until the start of term." "Change of plans," she said, sliding onto the bench beside him. "My parents had a dental conference, and I thought I'd rather be back here with you too." She peered at the chessboard. "Still hopeless at chess, Harry?" "Completely," he agreed cheerfully. "But Ron's been teaching me the finer points of having my pieces brutally massacred." Ron grinned, then turned more serious. "Actually, there's something we need to tell you. Harry got an invisibility cloak for Christmas." "An invisibility cloak?" Hermione feigned surprise. "Those are incredibly rare." "Who sent it?" Harry shrugged. "The note wasn't signed. Just said it belonged to my father, and that the sender was returning it to me." "We've already put it to good use," Ron added with a mischievous grin. "Found a brilliant mirror in an unused classroom that shows you your heart's desire. Harry saw his parents in it, and I saw myself as head boy and Quidditch captain, holding the house cup. But Dumbledore caught me looking at it last night," Harry continued, his expression growing somber. "He's moving it somewhere else. Said men have wasted away in front of it, seeing what they can never have." Hermione nodded thoughtfully, relieved that this crucial event had still occurred. "That sounds dangerous. What's the mirror called?" "Erased something," Harry replied. The inscription was odd, sort of backward. "I show not your face but your heart's desire," Hermione quoted automatically, then caught herself. "I mean, that would make sense, if it's showing what you most want." Harry gave her that searching look again, the one that made her feel transparent, but didn't comment on her inexplicable knowledge of the mirror's inscription. "Anyway," he continued, "we've been using the cloak to get into the restricted section at night, looking for information on Nicholas Flamel. No luck so far." "Oh, that reminds me," Hermione exclaimed, seizing the opportunity to advance their investigation. "I think I might have found something about Flamel in one of my light holiday reading books." She rummaged in her bag, producing a massive tome entitled Great Wizarding Achievements of the Modern Era. I checked this out before leaving for Christmas but didn't have a chance to read it until I was home. Look here, she opened to a page she had carefully bookmarked. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist, celebrated his 665th birthday last year. He and his wife Perenelle credit their extraordinary longevity to the Philosopher's Stone. Harry and Ron crowded around the book, reading the passage with growing excitement. "That's it!" Harry exclaimed. "That's what Fluffy's guarding, the Philosopher's Stone." "It makes sense," Ron agreed. "Creating gold and the elixir of life, who wouldn't want that? And if Snape, or whoever, is trying to steal it." Harry trailed off, the implications clear. Hermione watched their faces, satisfaction mingling with a touch of guilt at her manipulation. But she was certain this acceleration of their discovery was necessary. In their original timeline, they hadn't identified the stone until much later, leaving them less time to prepare for the eventual confrontation. "We need to figure out who's really after it," she said firmly. "We shouldn't just assume it's Snape without proof." Ron looked skeptical. "Who else could it be? Quirrell?" He snorted at the absurdity. "The man's afraid of his own shadow." "Sometimes people aren't what they seem," Hermione replied quietly. "We should keep open minds." The remainder of the holiday passed quickly. With the mystery of Nicholas Flamel solved much earlier than in their original timeline, they devoted their free time to research and preparation, studying magical defenses, practicing spells that might prove useful, and discussing various scenarios they might encounter. Hermione carefully guided these sessions, suggesting specific spells she knew would be relevant: fire-creating charms, basic healing magic, the full bodybind curse. She also ensured Neville was included whenever possible, helping him master defensive magic she knew he would one day need. "You're getting really good at this, Neville," she encouraged after he successfully performed a shield charm, well beyond first-year level, during one of their practice sessions. "You just needed confidence." Neville flushed with pleasure. "It's easier when you explain it. The way professors teach sometimes makes me nervous, and then I mess up." "Everyone learns differently," she told him. "There's nothing wrong with needing a different approach." This investment in Neville was another deliberate change to the timeline. In their original first year, they'd mostly ignored him until the very end, when he bravely tried to stop them from going after the stone and earned the 10 points that secured Gryffindor's House Cup victory. This time, Hermione was laying groundwork for the leader he would become years later during the darkest days of Voldemort's return. When the rest of the students returned for the spring term, classes resumed their demanding pace. Hermione continued her balancing act, demonstrating enough knowledge to maintain her academic standing without revealing the full extent of her abilities, guiding Harry and Ron's investigations without being suspiciously prescient, and making small but strategic changes to the timeline while monitoring their effects. One such change occurred during their flying lessons. In their original timeline, Neville had broken his wrist during their first lesson, leading to Harry's forbidden flight after Malfoy and his subsequent appointment as Gryffindor Seeker. Since that had already happened differently this time, Hermione focused instead on helping Neville overcome his fear of flying. "The broom senses your anxiety," she explained during a Saturday practice session she'd organized. "If you're afraid of it, it becomes harder to control, which makes you more afraid, a vicious cycle." "That's easy for you to say," Neville muttered, eyeing the school broom beside him with trepidation. "You're not the one who keeps falling off. That's why we're doing this now, without Madam Hooch watching or Slytherins making comments," she said firmly. "Just focus on the feeling of being in control. The broom is a tool, nothing more." With patient guidance from Hermione and enthusiastic encouragement from Harry, a natural flyer, Neville gradually improved from barely hovering to making slow circuits of the Quidditch pitch. He'd never be a star player, but his newfound competence boosted his confidence in ways that extended beyond flying. "Thanks for helping me with this," he told her as they walked back to the castle after one session. "My gran always said I'd never be good at flying like my dad was. It's nice to prove her wrong, even a little bit." Another small ripple in the timeline, another life potentially changed for the better. But not all of Hermione's interventions went as planned. In late January, Harry came to her with news that made her blood run cold. "Snape's going to referee our next Quidditch match," he told her and Ron in a hushed voice as they worked in the library. "Wood just told me." In their original timeline, this had happened. Snape had refereed the match against Hufflepuff, supposedly to protect Harry after the jinxing incident. But that match had occurred in February, not January, and had featured Dumbledore in attendance, preventing any further attempts on Harry's life. "When is the match?" Hermione asked, trying to hide her alarm. "This Saturday," Harry replied grimly. "Against Ravenclaw, not Hufflepuff like it was supposed to be." There was some scheduling change. This was a significant deviation from their original timeline, one Hermione hadn't anticipated or caused. The butterfly effect in action, her changes causing unpredictable shifts in events. "You can't play," Ron said immediately. "Pretend to be ill." "Or actually be ill," Neville suggested from beside them, where he'd been struggling with a potions essay. "Fred and George could slip you something from Zonko's that would make you sick enough to miss the match." "I can't," Harry insisted. "There isn't a reserve seeker. If I don't play, Gryffindor can't play at all." Hermione bit her lip, thinking rapidly. The original safeguard, Dumbledore's presence, might not exist in this altered timeline. "Is Professor Dumbledore planning to attend the match?" she asked. Harry shrugged. "No idea. He doesn't come to all of them." "He should come to this one," she said firmly. "After what happened at the last match." "How do we make sure he comes?" Ron asked. "It's not like we can just invite the headmaster to a Quidditch match." But Hermione was already formulating a plan. "Actually, I think we can. Or rather, I can." She stood, gathering her books. "Leave it to me. And Harry, be extra careful during practice this week. Don't go anywhere alone." The next day, after careful consideration, Hermione did something she'd never done in her original timeline. She requested a meeting with Dumbledore. The Gargoyle Guardian leapt aside at the password Professor McGonagall had reluctantly provided, acid pops, and Hermione ascended the spiral staircase with her heart in her throat. She'd faced Dumbledore many times in her original life, but never alone, and never with the burden of her temporal secret weighing on her. "Enter," came his voice before she could even knock. The headmaster's office was just as she remembered, circular, filled with whirring silver instruments and portraits of former headmasters pretending to doze in their frames. Fawkes the Phoenix sat on his perch, watching her with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through her. And behind the desk sat Albus Dumbledore himself, alive and well, blue eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles, his silver beard gleaming in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the high windows. "Miss Granger," he greeted her warmly. "What a pleasant surprise. Please, sit down." Hermione perched nervously on the edge of the chair opposite his desk. "Thank you for seeing me, Professor. I always have time for students with concerns," he replied, studying her with that penetrating gaze. "And I sense you have a significant concern indeed." She swallowed hard. "It's about Harry, sir. About the upcoming Quidditch match." "Ah, yes. Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw. I understand Professor Snape will be refereeing." "That's part of what worries me, sir." Hermione chose her words carefully, aware of the delicate balance between providing enough information to ensure Dumbledore's attendance without revealing her foreknowledge. "After what happened at the last match, Harry's broom being jinxed, I'm concerned about his safety." Dumbledore's expression remained mild, but something in his eyes sharpened. "A reasonable concern, though I assure you, Professor Snape has Harry's best interests at heart." "I believe you, sir," Hermione said, surprising herself with her own sincerity. In the years following the war, she'd come to understand Snape's complex loyalties better than most. "But I'm worried that whoever tried to harm Harry before might try again. And with Professor Snape focusing on refereeing, he might not be able to help if something goes wrong." "I see," Dumbledore said softly. And what would you suggest, Miss Granger? I thought perhaps, if you were planning to attend the match anyway, sir, it might help deter anyone with ill intentions. The headmaster leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. Most students would take their concerns to their head of house, Miss Granger. Why come directly to me? It was a fair question, and one Hermione had anticipated. Because I think whoever is targeting Harry is probably afraid of you more than anyone else, sir. And because. She hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. Because I've read enough magical history to know that you're the only wizard Voldemort ever feared. If one of his followers is at Hogwarts, your presence would be the strongest protection Harry could have. Something like surprise flickered across Dumbledore's face at her bold use of Voldemort's name, uncommon among wizards, and especially rare in Muggle-born first years. You speak the name that most wizards fear to mention, Miss Granger. Harry does too, she pointed out. And you've said yourself that fear of a name only increases fear of the thing itself. Indeed I have, Dumbledore agreed, looking increasingly intrigued. Though I don't recall saying so in your presence. Hermione felt a chill run down her spine. A mistake, she'd referenced something she couldn't have heard yet. I read it in a book about the First Wizarding War, she improvised. They quoted you. Ah, yes. I have been known to be quotable from time to time. His eyes twinkled, but Hermione wasn't entirely sure he'd accepted her explanation. Well, Miss Granger, as it happens, I was indeed planning to attend Saturday's match. I find Quidditch most invigorating to watch, especially when played with the enthusiasm Gryffindor has shown this year. Relief washed through her. Thank you, sir. Though I wonder, Dumbledore continued, his gaze never leaving her face, how you came to be so protective of Harry in such a short time. You've known him only a few months, yet you speak with the concern of a much longer friendship. This was dangerous territory. Hermione chose her response with extreme care. Harry didn't have anyone looking out for him before Hogwarts, sir. His relatives. She let the sentence hang, knowing Dumbledore was aware of the Dursleys' treatment of Harry. I think he deserves to have people who care about his well-being now. Ron and I, and Neville too, we've become a sort of family for each other. That's what friendship means, isn't it? Protecting the people you care about. Dumbledore's expression softened. Indeed it is, Miss Granger. Indeed it is. He stood, signaling the end of their meeting. I shall certainly see you at the Quidditch match on Saturday. And Miss Granger? Yes, Professor. 5 points to Gryffindor, for loyalty to your friends. As Hermione descended the spiral staircase, she wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or troubled by the encounter. She'd accomplished her primary goal, ensuring Dumbledore's presence at the match, but at what cost? The headmaster was arguably the most perceptive wizard at Hogwarts. Had she revealed too much? Aroused suspicions that would complicate her plans? Only time would tell. But as with all her interventions, the ripples were spreading outward in patterns she could neither fully predict nor control. The Quidditch match unfolded much as it had in their original timeline, with one significant difference: instead of Hufflepuff as the opponent, Gryffindor faced Ravenclaw. Snape still refereed with obvious bias, awarding penalties to Ravenclaw for increasingly dubious infractions. Dumbledore still attended, his tall figure and silver beard unmistakable in the stands. And Harry still caught the snitch in record time, less than 5 minutes after the starting whistle, preventing any potential attack from succeeding. But the aftermath differed in subtle yet meaningful ways. As Harry landed to thunderous applause from the Gryffindor supporters, Hermione and Ron raced onto the pitch to congratulate him, with Neville following close behind. In their rush of euphoria, none of them noticed Snape slipping away toward the Forbidden Forest until Harry spotted him from their elevated position in the crowd. I wonder where Snape's going, he said, nodding toward the distant black-cloaked figure. Ron squinted. Looks like he's heading into the forest. Weird. In their original timeline, Harry had followed Snape alone, eavesdropping on his confrontation with Quirrell. This time, Hermione made a split-second decision. "We should follow him," she suggested, lowering her voice. "Under your invisibility cloak, Harry." "All of us." "All four of us won't fit," Harry pointed out. "Then you, me, and Ron." "Sorry, Neville," she added, genuinely apologetic. Neville looked relieved rather than disappointed. "That's all right. I'll tell everyone you're celebrating in the common room if anyone asks." 20 minutes later, crammed uncomfortably beneath the invisibility cloak, they crept through the edge of the forbidden forest, following the sound of voices until they came upon a clearing where Snape stood facing a trembling Quirrell. "Don't know why you wanted TT to meet here of all places, Severus," Quirrell was stammering. "Oh, I thought we'd keep this private," Snape replied, his voice icy. "Students aren't supposed to know about the Philosopher's Stone, after all." Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged glances beneath the cloak. Their suspicions were confirmed, and they'd learned this crucial information weeks earlier than in their original timeline. "Have you found out how to get past that beast of Hagrid's yet?" Snape continued. But Severus, you don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell," Snape interrupted, taking a step toward the nervous defense professor. I don't know what you know perfectly well what I mean. Your little bit of hocus pocus. I'm waiting. But I don't, very well, Snape cut in. We'll have another little chat soon, when you've had time to think things over and decide where your loyalties lie. He threw his cloak over his head and strode out of the clearing. Quirrell stood frozen, too afraid to move for several moments before he too departed, heading back toward the castle. Once they were alone, Harry pulled off the invisibility cloak. "So we were right. The stone is what Fluffy's guarding. And Snape's trying to force Quirrell to help him get it." "That's what it sounded like," Ron agreed, looking troubled. "Poor Quirrell doesn't stand a chance against Snape." Hermione frowned, seeing an opportunity to plant seeds of doubt. "I'm not so sure. Did you notice Snape asked if Quirrell had found out how to get past Fluffy? Why would he ask that if he was working alone? And he mentioned your little bit of hocus pocus, like Quirrell had already done something suspicious." Harry's brow furrowed. "You think Quirrell might be involved too? But he seems so harmless." "Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem least threatening," she said quietly. "I'm not saying it's definitely Quirrell instead of Snape. I just think we should consider all possibilities before jumping to conclusions." This subtle redirection, planting doubt about Snape's guilt while suggesting Quirrell might not be as innocent as he appeared, was a calculated move. In their original timeline, they had remained convinced of Snape's villainy until the final confrontation with Quirrell, leaving them shocked and unprepared. This time, Hermione hoped to prepare them better while still allowing events to unfold in a way that would lead to Harry's necessary confrontation with Quirrell/Voldemort. As they made their way back to the castle under the cloak, Harry was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, as they reached the entrance hall, he spoke. "Hermione, why did you suggest we all follow Snape? How did you know we'd discover something important?" Again, that perceptive question that cut too close to the truth. Hermione chose her words with care. "I didn't know for certain," she replied. "But Snape leaving right after a match he'd insisted on refereeing seemed suspicious. And given everything else that's happened this year, the troll, your broom being jinxed, it seemed worth investigating. Sometimes you have to follow your instincts." Harry accepted this explanation, but Hermione couldn't ignore the growing frequency of his questions about her insights and suggestions. Sooner or later, she might need to trust him with some version of the truth, though the full reality of her time displacement seemed too incredible, and potentially dangerous, to share. The weeks following the Quidditch match brought new challenges. Their coursework intensified as professors began preparing them for end-of-year exams. Hermione created study schedules for all of them, including Neville, who had shown remarkable improvement under her tutelage. The teachers had noticed too, Professor Sprout awarded him 10 points in herbology for his perfect handling of a particularly temperamental plant, and even Snape had reduced his usual scathing criticism to mere disdainful sniffs when Neville's potions turned out correctly. Meanwhile, they continued their own investigations and preparations, spurred by the knowledge that someone, whether Snape or Quirrell, was actively pursuing the Philosopher's Stone. Harry had suggested informing a teacher about what they'd overheard in the forest, but Hermione gently discouraged this approach. "We don't have any real proof," she pointed out. "And if Snape is involved, he'd find out we'd reported him. Better to keep watch ourselves while gathering more evidence." This reasoning satisfied Harry and Ron, allowing Hermione to maintain the course of events that would lead to their eventual passage through the trapdoor. But she was also laying groundwork for their success once they got there, practicing relevant spells, researching magical plants and potions, and even teaching Harry and Ron the basics of wizard chess strategy, which would prove crucial during Ron's sacrifice in the chess chamber. "I don't understand why you're suddenly so keen on chess," Ron remarked one evening as she insisted he explain a particular defensive formation. "You've always said it's barbaric." "The strategy is fascinating," she replied, which was true enough. "And you never know when understanding chess might come in handy." As March turned to April, another significant deviation from their original timeline occurred, one Hermione neither anticipated nor caused. Hagrid, who had won a dragon egg from a stranger in Hogsmeade in their original timeline, apparently never made this ill-fated acquisition. Their regular visits to his hut revealed no secret egg being incubated in the fireplace, no discussions about Norwegian ridgebacks, no furtive preparations for an illegal dragon hatching. This absence perplexed Hermione until she realized the probable cause. In their original timeline, they'd been researching Nicholas Flamel when they visited Hagrid, leading the gamekeeper to reveal more than he intended about the Philosopher's Stone, which in turn had prompted their visit to Hogsmeade where he'd encountered the stranger with the dragon egg. With their accelerated discovery of Flamel's identity, that sequence of events had been altered. The missing dragon episode had significant implications. In their original timeline, Harry, Hermione, and Neville had been caught out of bed while delivering the dragon to Charlie Weasley's friends, resulting in a severe loss of house points and a detention in the Forbidden Forest where Harry had his first direct encounter with Voldemort. Without this chain of events, how would Harry come to understand the presence of Voldemort at Hogwarts? How would he gain the crucial clue about unicorn blood being used to sustain the Dark Lord's parasitic existence? Hermione deliberated for days before deciding to engineer a substitute scenario. During their next study session in the library, she deliberately selected a book on magical creatures that included a section on unicorns. "Did you know unicorn blood can keep you alive even if you're inches from death?" she commented, leaving the book open for Harry to see. "Though it comes at a terrible price, you have a cursed life from the moment the blood touches your lips." "Who would be desperate enough to do that?" Ron asked, looking up from his own textbook. "Someone with nothing to lose," Harry replied thoughtfully. "Someone who just needs to stay alive long enough to find something better." Hermione nodded encouragingly. "Like someone seeking the Philosopher's Stone, which would give them true immortality without a curse." Harry's eyes widened as the implications sank in. "You think whoever's after the stone might be using unicorn blood in the meantime? To stay alive until they can get it?" "It's possible," she said, careful not to sound too certain. "Hagrid would know if something's been attacking unicorns in the forest. We could ask him." This suggestion led to their next visit to Hagrid's hut, where they casually inquired about the welfare of creatures in the Forbidden Forest. Hagrid, visibly troubled, confirmed that something had indeed been hunting unicorns. "Found one dead last week," he told them grimly. "Somethin's been sloshin' them, drinkin' their blood. Never seen anythin' like it before." "What kind of creature would do that?" Harry asked, exactly the question Hermione had hoped for. "No ordinary creature, that's fair sure," Hagrid replied. "Unicorn blood's powerful stuff, but the price ya pay, only somethin' with nothin' to lose would do it. Somethin' desperate." On their walk back to the castle, Harry connected the dots just as Hermione had intended. If someone's desperate enough to drink unicorn blood, knowing they'll be cursed, they must be after the stone for its elixir of life, Ron finished. To reverse the curse. But who would be that desperate? Harry wondered. Snape doesn't seem like he's dying or cursed. Maybe it's not Snape, Hermione suggested, seizing the opportunity to redirect their suspicions again. Maybe it's someone who needs the stone for someone else. This carefully crafted conversation, while not replicating Harry's direct encounter with Voldemort drinking unicorn blood, provided the same essential information, that something unnatural and desperate was at Hogwarts, seeking immortality at any cost. It kept them alert to the danger while maintaining the overall direction of events toward the final confrontation that had to occur. As April gave way to May, exam preparation intensified. Hermione kept a careful eye on Quirrell, noting his increasingly gaunt appearance and nervous twitching, signs of Voldemort's parasitic presence taking its toll. She also monitored Harry for any indications of his scar hurting, which had been a crucial warning sign in their original timeline. Sure enough, during a particularly grueling study session in the library, Harry abruptly pressed his hand to his forehead with a grimace of pain. "You all right, mate?" Ron asked, looking up from his astronomy chart. "Headache," Harry muttered. "It's nothing." But Hermione recognized the gesture. "Is it your scar? Does it hurt?" Harry looked surprised at her perception. "Yeah, actually. It's been happening on and off for a while now. Mostly when." He trailed off, frowning. "When what?" she prompted gently. "When Quirrell's around," he admitted. "Or sometimes near the third-floor corridor. Probably just coincidence." "Or not," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Harry, your scar isn't an ordinary scar. It was created by powerful dark magic. If it hurts around certain people or places, that could mean something." Harry's eyes widened slightly. "You think it's, what, warning me?" "I think it's worth paying attention to," she said simply. "What does your instinct tell you about Quirrell?" He considered this for a long moment. "Honestly? That something's off about him. The stutter seems exaggerated sometimes. And he always wears that turban, even though it's not really traditional wizard wear. And he smells funny," Ron added, earning a sharp look from Hermione. "What?" "He does. Like garlic, but also something else. Something rotten." This observation, which Ron had also made in their original timeline, sent a chill down Hermione's spine. Voldemort's parasitic presence, literally rotting on the back of Quirrell's head. "Maybe we should watch him more closely," she suggested. "All of us, including Neville. If he's involved with the stone somehow. Then we need to be ready," Harry finished, his expression hardening with resolve. Another piece in place. Another step toward the inevitable confrontation. But this time, they would be better prepared, more aware of the true danger, and more capable of facing it together. As May progressed, Hermione became increasingly certain that the climactic events surrounding the Philosopher's Stone would occur soon. In their original timeline, Quirrell had made his move after Harry's detention in the Forbidden Forest, but with that event missing from this altered timeline, she couldn't be sure exactly when he would act. The answer came in late May, when Harry burst into the common room after a solo flying session, his face pale with urgency. "I just overheard Quirrell," he said breathlessly, dropping into a chair beside Hermione and Ron. "In an empty classroom. He was talking to himself, or to someone I couldn't see. He said, 'Very well, I'll do it tonight.'" Ron's eyes widened. "Tonight? He's going after the stone tonight?" "Sounds like it," Harry confirmed grimly. And get this, his stutter was completely gone. He sounded different. Confident. Cold. Hermione felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment everything had been building toward. But it was happening nearly a month earlier than in their original timeline, another butterfly effect of her changes. "We need to go to Dumbledore," she said firmly, knowing full well the headmaster would be absent, just as he had been in their original timeline. This absence was crucial. Harry needed to face Quirrell/Voldemort alone for reasons Dumbledore himself would later explain, involving ancient magic and his mother's protection. "I'll try to find McGonagall," Harry decided. "She'll know how to reach Dumbledore." But when they located Professor McGonagall in the staff room, her response was exactly as Hermione expected, and needed. "Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago," she informed them, looking surprised at their urgent inquiry. "He received an urgent owl from the Ministry of Magic and departed immediately for London." "But Professor, it's important," Harry insisted. "It's about the Philosopher's Stone." McGonagall's shock at their knowledge of the stone was palpable. After assuring them that the stone was perfectly well protected and suggesting they return to their dormitories, she dismissed their concerns entirely. "She didn't believe us," Ron said glumly as they huddled in an empty classroom afterward. "And with Dumbledore gone, we'll have to stop Quirrell ourselves," Harry declared, his expression resolute. "Are you sure it's Quirrell, not Snape?" Ron asked, still clinging to their original suspect. Harry nodded slowly. "My scar never hurts around Snape. And after what I heard today, yes, I'm sure." Hermione felt a flush of satisfaction at this development. Her subtle redirections had worked, preparing Harry to face the true enemy rather than being blindsided at the final moment. "Tonight, then," she said quietly. "After everyone's asleep. We'll go to the third-floor corridor and get through the trapdoor before Quirrell can steal the stone." As they finalized their plans, Hermione couldn't help wondering if she'd done enough to prepare them. In their original timeline, they'd succeeded by the narrowest of margins, with each of them contributing crucial skills at key moments. Would her changes to the timeline, her earlier friendship with Neville, their advanced magical practice, Harry's awareness of Quirrell as the true threat, alter the outcome in ways she couldn't predict? Only time would tell. But as she looked at Harry and Ron's determined faces, she felt a surge of hope. This time, they weren't fumbling in the dark. This time, they had knowledge, preparation, and a stronger bond than ever before. This time, the ripples she'd created might carry them all to safety. As darkness fell over Hogwarts that evening, Hermione prepared herself for what was to come. Whatever happened beyond the trapdoor, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 3, Shifting Foundations. The common room fell silent as the last Gryffindor trudged up to bed. Hermione sat perfectly still in the shadows beside the dying fire, listening to the castle settle around her. In her hand, she clutched her wand so tightly her knuckles whitened. 11 years old again physically, but her mind remembered another night exactly like this one, and the horrors that would follow in the years to come. "Ready?" Harry's whisper came from the boys' staircase. He and Ron emerged, already dressed in dark clothing, their faces set with determination that looked out of place on such young features. "Ready," Hermione confirmed, rising to her feet. What she didn't say was that she'd been ready for months, preparing them with subtle guidance, strategic study sessions, and carefully selected defensive spells. In her original timeline, they'd stumbled through the third-floor challenges with desperate luck. This time would be different. Ron clutched his wand nervously. "So it's definitely happening tonight? Quirrell's going after the stone." Harry heard him, Hermione said quietly. "And Dumbledore's conveniently away. It's too perfect to be coincidence." They were halfway to the portrait hole when a small voice spoke from the shadows. "Where are you going?" Neville stepped into the firelight, still fully dressed in his school robes, his round face a mixture of confusion and hurt. "You're sneaking out again, aren't you? Without me this time." In her original timeline, Neville had tried to stop them, and she'd been forced to use the full body bind curse on him. That Neville had been excluded from their friendship, desperate to prove his worth. This Neville, the one she befriended from the beginning, included in their study sessions, helped build confidence, looked not accusatory but wounded. Harry and Ron exchanged uncomfortable glances, but Hermione made a split-second decision. Another calculated ripple. "Neville," she said gently, someone is trying to steal something Dumbledore's protecting. Something dangerous. We're going to stop them because all the teachers think we're making it up. Neville's expression shifted from hurt to concern. Is that why you've been teaching us all those defensive spells? You knew this was coming. We suspected, Harry answered before Hermione could. We've got to go now, before it's too late. Neville straightened his shoulders. Then I'm coming too. Ron looked alarmed. Neville, mate, it's going to be dangerous, all the more reason you need help, Neville said with surprising firmness. 4 wands are better than 3. And I've gotten much better at spells, thanks to Hermione. Hermione felt a surge of pride mixed with anxiety. This was a significant deviation from their original journey, but somehow it felt right. The Neville who stood before them now contained the seeds of the young man who would eventually lead Dumbledore's army and decapitate Nagini with the sword of Gryffindor. He's right, she said, making her decision. Neville should come. Harry looked dubious but nodded. All right. But stay close, and if we tell you to run, you run. Agreed? Neville nodded solemnly. Agreed. The 4 of them slipped beneath Harry's invisibility cloak, an uncomfortably tight fit that forced them to shuffle slowly through the corridors. Hermione's mind raced with adjustments to her mental plan. How would Neville's presence change the challenges ahead? Would 4 first years trigger different defensive responses than 3 had in her original timeline? They reached the 3rd floor without encountering Filch or Mrs. Norris, another deviation, as they'd narrowly avoided both in her original timeline. The door to the forbidden corridor was already ajar. Someone's been here, Harry whispered, confirming what they all suspected. Quirrell's already inside. Harry pulled off the invisibility cloak and stowed it in his pocket. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open wider. Low, rumbling growls filled the chamber beyond. Fluffy, the massive 3-headed dog, stood alert in the center of the room, all 6 eyes fixed on the intruders, saliva dripping from 3 sets of yellowed fangs. Blimey, Neville gasped, his newfound courage visibly faltering. But something was different. A small wooden flute lay discarded near the trapdoor. Quirrell had already put the beast to sleep once and passed through. He must have just gone through, Ron whispered. The dog's awake again. Hermione spotted the harp in the corner, another remnant of Quirrell's passing. She thought quickly. Music puts him to sleep, she whispered. Does anyone know how to play that flute? No one did, but Hermione wasn't deterred. In her original timeline, they'd sung an impromptu lullaby. This time, she had a better solution. Stand back, she instructed, raising her wand. Cantatio Dormis. A simple melodic charm she'd learned in her 3rd year floated from her wand, a gentle, flowing tune that immediately caught Fluffy's attention. The massive dog's eyelids began to droop, and within moments, all 3 heads were nodding in rhythm to the ethereal music emanating from her wand. Brilliant, Harry breathed as the beast slowly sank to its knees, then collapsed on its side, all 6 eyes closing. Quick, Hermione whispered, maintaining the spell. Through the trapdoor. I'll come last, the music will stop when I jump. Harry pulled open the trapdoor while Ron and Neville peered anxiously into the darkness below. Can't see the bottom, Ron muttered. Might break something if we just jump. I'll go first, Harry decided. If anything happens to me, get out and go straight to McGonagall. Before anyone could object, he lowered himself through the opening and let go. They heard a muffled thump, then Harry's voice floating up. It's okay. There's something soft to land on. Ron followed immediately, then Neville, who hesitated only briefly before taking a deep breath and dropping into the darkness. Hermione, still maintaining the charm, backed toward the trapdoor, keeping her wand pointed at Fluffy. The moment she reached the opening, she released the spell and dropped through, pulling the trapdoor shut behind her. She landed with a soft thud on what she knew to be Devil's Snare. Already, tendrils of the plant were wrapping around her ankles, just as they were encircling the boys. What is this stuff? Ron gasped, struggling against the tightening vines. Neville's eyes widened with recognition. "Devil's snare," he exclaimed. "Stop moving, all of you. The more you struggle, the faster it kills you." Hermione felt a rush of satisfaction. In their original timeline, she'd had to identify the plant and remember the countermeasure under pressure. This time, Neville, with his newfound confidence and natural aptitude for herbology, took charge immediately. "We need light and warmth," he continued, his voice steadier than Hermione had ever heard it at this age. "Devil's snare hates both." "Then make some." Ron choked as a tendril wrapped around his throat. Neville had already drawn his wand, though his arm was partially restrained by the plant. "Lumos solum," he cried, producing a jet of the same bluebell flames Hermione had used in their original timeline. The plant recoiled instantly, its tendrils unwinding as it shrank from the light. Within moments, they dropped through to the stone floor below, safe but shaken. "That was incredible, Neville," Harry said, clapping him on the shoulder. "How did you know what to do?" "Hermione made me read ahead in herbology," Neville replied, but his face glowed with pride. "And Professor Sprout mentioned Devil's Snare last week." "One down," Hermione said, brushing dirt from her robes. "Let's keep moving." They proceeded down the stone passageway, wands lit, alert for the next challenge. The distant sound of rustling and clinking grew louder as they approached a brilliantly lit chamber filled with what appeared to be small, jewel-bright birds fluttering near the ceiling. "Those aren't birds," Harry said, narrowing his eyes. "They're keys. And look, brooms." 3 broomsticks leaned against the wall beside a heavy wooden door. Hermione frowned. 3, not 4. The room hadn't adjusted for Neville's presence. Which meant the challenges had been prepared in advance, calibrated for specific numbers. "We need to catch the key that fits that door," she explained, pointing to the lock. "It's probably silver, old-fashioned, to match the lock." Harry nodded, already moving toward a broomstick. "Ron, you're a decent flyer. You take one too. Hermione and Neville can guide us from below." Ron looked pleased at being included in the flying task. In their original timeline, only Harry had flown. Another small change. They mounted the brooms and kicked off, soaring into the cloud of winged keys. "There!" Hermione called, pointing. "That large silver one with the bent wing. Quirrell must have already caught it once, that's why it's damaged." Harry and Ron coordinated their approach like veteran Quidditch players, herding the key into a corner before Harry made a spectacular grab. They landed triumphantly, and Harry jammed the struggling key into the lock. It turned with a click, and the door swung open. The next chamber was dark until they stepped across the threshold. Suddenly, light flooded the room, revealing a giant chessboard with pieces taller than they were. Behind the black chessmen, they could see another door. "Now what?" Neville whispered. "It's obvious, isn't it?" Ron said, his voice tight with excitement. "We've got to play our way across." Hermione had been dreading this moment. In their original timeline, Ron had sacrificed himself in a brutal game of wizard chess, suffering a concussion that left him unconscious while she and Harry continued on. Would history repeat itself? "We have to take the places of 4 black pieces," Ron continued, studying the board with intensity Hermione had only ever seen him direct at chess. "Harry, you take the place of that bishop. Hermione, you're the queenside castle. Neville, that knight there. I'll be a knight too." This was different. In their original timeline, Ron had been a knight, Harry a bishop, and Hermione a castle. The addition of Neville had altered the configuration. "Ron," Hermione said hesitantly, "you know wizard chess. If one of us gets taken, they get smashed," Ron finished grimly. "I know. That's why I'm putting us all in defensive positions. I've been studying chess strategy since you started insisting on it, Hermione. Trust me." The game that followed was a masterclass in defensive chess. Ron called out moves with unexpected maturity and foresight, protecting their positions while methodically advancing against the white pieces. Hermione watched in growing admiration as he sacrificed regular pieces instead of their human-occupied ones, slowly maneuvering toward checkmate. Almost there, Ron muttered after 20 tense minutes. 2 more moves and I'll have their king. But... He hesitated, his freckled face troubled. What is it? Harry asked. There's no way around it. One of us has to be taken for the final sequence to work. His eyes met Hermione's. The Queen has to take one of us to open the line for checkmate. Hermione's heart sank. History repeating after all. I'll do it, Ron said firmly. It has to be a knight, and I've got the better position for the sequence. No. Neville's voice rang out with surprising authority. I'll do it. You're the chess master, Ron. If anyone gets hurt, you need to be conscious to finish the game and get Harry and Hermione through. Hermione stared at Neville in astonishment. The boy who had once been afraid of his own shadow was volunteering for what he knew would be a violent sacrifice. Are you sure, Neville? Harry asked quietly. Neville nodded, his round face pale but determined. You all have skills I don't. Ron understands the game. Hermione knows everything about everything. And Harry. He swallowed hard. Harry, you're the one who has to go on to the end. I've seen how your scar hurts around Quirrell. This is about you-know-who somehow, isn't it? The perceptiveness of his statement startled them all. How did you know? Harry whispered. I've been watching too, Neville replied simply. My move, Ron. Ron hesitated, then nodded. Knight to h3. Neville took a deep breath and stepped onto the indicated square. Immediately, the White Queen turned toward him, advancing with terrible purpose. Hermione wanted to look away but forced herself to watch as the Stone Queen struck Neville with her arm, knocking him to the ground where he lay motionless. Hermione and Harry both started forward, but Ron's voice stopped them. Don't move. We're still playing. 2 moves later, Ron declared checkmate, and the White King removed his crown, tossing it at Ron's feet. The remaining pieces parted, clearing the path to the door. They rushed to Neville's side. He was unconscious but breathing steadily, a nasty gash on his forehead but otherwise intact. He'll be okay, Hermione said after a quick examination. But he needs Madame Pomfrey. I'll stay with him, Ron decided. You two go on. Stop Quirrell. Are you sure? Harry asked. Ron nodded grimly. Neville was right. It has to be you, Harry. And you'll need Hermione's brains. I'll get Neville out and find help. Another change, in their original timeline, Ron had been incapacitated, forcing Hermione and Harry to leave him behind. This time, Ron was making a conscious choice to stay, prioritizing Neville's safety. The ripples of her friendship interventions were paying unexpected dividends. Hermione hugged Ron quickly. Be careful. If you can, try to send an owl to Dumbledore. He needs to know what's happening. With a last glance at Neville's unconscious form, Hermione and Harry proceeded through the door and down another passageway. The moment they crossed the threshold into the next chamber, a disgusting smell assaulted their nostrils. A troll even larger than the one they'd faced at Halloween lay unconscious on the floor, a bloody lump on its head. Glad we didn't have to fight that one, Harry muttered, stepping carefully around the creature's massive legs. Quirrell must have handled it already. Quirrell's defense against the dark arts specialty is supposed to be trolls, Hermione remarked, remembering information that had seemed inconsequential in their original timeline. He probably had little trouble with this one. They passed through to the next chamber, where flames immediately sprang up in the doorways both ahead and behind them. In the center of the room stood a table with 7 differently shaped bottles arranged in a line. Snape's challenge, Hermione murmured, approaching the table. A roll of parchment lay beside the bottles, containing the logic puzzle she remembered. This isn't magic, it's logic, she explained to Harry after reading the riddle. Most wizards haven't an ounce of logic, so they'd be stuck here forever. But you're not most wizards, Harry said, watching her with quiet confidence. Hermione smiled despite the tension. In her original timeline, she'd solved this puzzle through careful deduction. This time, she already knew the answer but pretended to work it out step by step for Harry's benefit. Got it, she announced after a suitable interval. The smallest bottle will get us through the black flames toward the stone. The round one at the right end will take us back through the purple flames. Harry picked up the tiny bottle, frowning at its contents. There's only enough for one person. This was the moment she'd been dreading, the point where, in their original timeline, she had turned back while Harry went on alone to face Quirrell. But she'd spent months preparing for this confrontation, subtly guiding their knowledge and skills. Could she really let him face Voldemort alone again? Harry, she began hesitantly. No, he interrupted firmly. I have to do this alone, Hermione. If Quirrell's working for Voldemort, and I think he is, then this was always going to come down to him and me. The certainty in his voice gave her pause. Even at 11, Harry understood his destiny with a clarity that sometimes escaped the adults around him. You're right, she conceded. But Harry, please be careful. Quirrell isn't what he seems. Remember what we suspected, about his turban, about why your scar hurts around him. Harry's eyes widened slightly. You think Voldemort is, with him somehow? That's why my scar reacts. It's the only explanation that makes sense, she replied. Your scar is a connection to Voldemort. If it hurts around Quirrell, then Voldemort is too, Harry finished, his face paling. How did you figure that out? Hermione hesitated. The pieces just fit together, she said finally. The unicorn blood, your scar, the way Quirrell always seems to be nearby when strange things happen. Harry studied her for a long moment. Sometimes I think you know more than you're saying, Hermione. The observation struck uncomfortably close to the truth. Before she could formulate a response, Harry continued. But I trust you. Whatever your reasons. He held up the tiny bottle. Wish me luck. You don't need luck, she told him, pouring conviction into her voice. You're Harry Potter. You're brave and good and stronger than you know. You can do this. He smiled crookedly, then drank the potion in one gulp. With a small shudder, he walked through the black flames without looking back. Hermione stared at the flames for several long moments. In her original timeline, she had returned through the purple flames, found Ron, and sent an owl to Dumbledore before encountering McGonagall. But this time, Ron was already handling that part of the plan. Which meant. She reached for the round bottle at the end of the line, the one containing the potion that would allow her to go back, then hesitated. There was another option, one she hadn't considered in her original timeline because the knowledge hadn't been available to her 11-year-old self. Fire-freezing charms. Medieval witches caught during witch burnings had used them to render flames harmless. Hermione had learned the charm in her 3rd year, but with her returned magical knowledge, she could cast it now. It wouldn't be expected or anticipated by whoever designed these defenses. Glacius temporia, she whispered, pointing her wand at the black flames. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flames turned ice blue, their heat dissipating. Hermione took a deep breath and stepped through, feeling only a mild cooling sensation as she passed. She had changed the game entirely. The chamber beyond was precisely as she remembered, the grand room with its high ceiling, the mirror of Eriste standing in the center, and 2 figures before it. Harry stood tensely while Quirrell, his back to Hermione, gesticulated wildly at the mirror. I see the stone, Quirrell was saying, his voice notably absent of any stutter. I'm presenting it to my master. But how do I get it? Neither had noticed Hermione's entrance. She silently disillusioned herself, another spell she shouldn't have known as a 1st year, and crept along the wall, positioning herself where she could intervene if necessary. Use the boy, came a high, cold voice that made Hermione's blood freeze. Voldemort. Quirrell rounded on Harry. Yes, Potter, come here. He clapped his hands, and ropes sprang out of thin air, binding Harry tightly. Quirrell dragged him in front of the mirror. Tell me, he demanded. What do you see? Harry stared into the mirror, and Hermione could see the exact moment when the stone appeared to him, the slight widening of his eyes, the almost imperceptible shift in his breathing. Just as in their original timeline, the mirror had given him the stone because he wanted to find it but not use it. I see myself shaking hands with Dumbledore, Harry lied. I've won the House Cup. He lies, shrieked the cold voice. Let me speak to him, face to face. Master, you are not strong enough. I have strength enough, for this. Hermione watched in horror as Quirrell unwound his turban, revealing what she knew would be there, the chalk-white face of Voldemort protruding from the back of Quirrell's head, its red eyes gleaming with malice, its flat nostrils flaring like a snake's. Harry Potter, it whispered. See what I have become. Mere shadow and vapor, forced to share another's body. But once I have the elixir of life, I can create a body of my own. Now, give me the stone in your pocket. Harry stumbled backward, breaking free of the magical ropes in his shock and fear. Don't be a fool, snarled Voldemort. Save your own life and join me. Or meet the same end as your parents. They died begging for mercy. Liar. Harry shouted. How touching, Voldemort hissed. Your parents died bravely. Your father put up a courageous fight, but your mother needn't have died at all. She was trying to protect you. Now give me the stone, unless you want her to have died in vain. Never. Harry sprang toward the flame door, but Voldemort screamed, seize him, and Quirrell's hand closed around Harry's wrist. Immediately, Quirrell howled in agony, releasing Harry and staring at his blistering fingers. Seize him. Seize him, shrieked Voldemort, and Quirrell lunged again, tackling Harry to the ground, wrapping his hands around the boy's throat despite the searing pain it clearly caused him. This was the moment Hermione had been waiting for. She knew from Harry's account that his mother's protective magic would ultimately destroy Quirrell, but not before nearly killing Harry as well. In their original timeline, Harry had fallen unconscious from the strain, and Dumbledore had arrived just in time to prevent Voldemort's shade from causing further harm. But Dumbledore wasn't here yet. And Hermione wasn't going to leave Harry's survival to chance. She dropped the disillusionment charm and raised her wand. Expulso, she cried, and a blast of blue light struck Quirrell, throwing him off Harry and against the far wall. Voldemort's face contorted with rage. The mud blood, he shrieked. Kill her. Quirrell staggered to his feet, drawing his wand despite his severely burned hands. Avada, Protego. Hermione shouted, throwing up a shield charm that deflected the beginning of the killing curse. Harry, touch him. Your touch burns him. Understanding dawned in Harry's eyes. He launched himself at Quirrell, pressing his hands against the professor's face. Quirrell screamed in agony as his skin blistered and cracked beneath Harry's touch. Master, I cannot hold him. Quirrell wailed. My hands. Then kill him, fool, and be done. Voldemort screeched. But Quirrell couldn't grasp his wand with his ruined hands, and Harry, seemingly understanding instinctively what he needed to do, maintained his hold despite the obvious pain it caused him. Hermione circled around, keeping her wand trained on the struggling pair. Keep holding on, Harry, she urged, though she could see him weakening. Quirrell's body began to crumble beneath Harry's touch, turning to ash and dust from the points of contact outward. With a final, terrible scream, he collapsed completely. Harry fell forward, exhausted, as a shadow rose from Quirrell's disintegrating remains. Voldemort's spectral form, a horrifying visage of smoke and malice, hovered momentarily above them. Then, with an unearthly howl, it rushed straight through Harry's prone form. Harry's scream pierced Hermione to her core. She raced to his side as he collapsed, unconscious, the philosopher's stone tumbling from his pocket. "Harry," she cried, gathering him into her arms. His pulse was weak but present. Just like in their original timeline, the confrontation had drained him to the point of collapse. The chamber door burst open, and Albus Dumbledore strode in, his face grim and his wand at the ready. His eyes widened at the tableau before him, Hermione cradling Harry's unconscious form, the dust that had been Quirrell scattered across the floor, and the gleaming red stone lying exposed. "He's alive," Hermione said quickly, looking up at the headmaster. "But barely. Quirrell, he had Voldemort attached to him. Harry's touch destroyed him." Dumbledore knelt beside them, checking Harry's pulse with long, nimble fingers. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Lily's protection endures." He glanced at Hermione, his blue eyes piercing. "And you, Miss Granger? How came you to be here?" "I was led to believe only Harry had proceeded to this chamber." There was something in his gaze, a knowing, a curiosity, that made Hermione's throat tighten. She had altered the timeline significantly from their original journey through the trapdoor. There would be consequences. "I found a way through the flames," she said, opting for honesty without specificity. "I couldn't let Harry face it alone." "Indeed." Dumbledore's expression was unreadable as he scooped Harry into his arms with surprising strength for a man of his age. "We must get him to the hospital wing immediately." "The stone, here, sir," Hermione said, picking it up and offering it to him. The blood-red crystal felt warm in her palm, pulsing with ancient magic. In their original timeline, it had been destroyed after this incident. Would that still happen? Dumbledore pocketed it carefully. "Now, let us depart this place. I imagine your friends are quite concerned about your welfare." As they ascended through the trapdoor challenges, Dumbledore using spells to bypass each one with remarkable ease, Hermione's mind raced with implications. Her presence in the final chamber was a significant deviation from their original timeline. So was Neville's involvement, Ron's conscious choice to stay behind, and her revelations to Harry about Quirrell and Voldemort before the confrontation. Ripples becoming waves, altering the course of events in ways she couldn't fully predict. When they reached the third floor, they found Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape waiting, having already retrieved Ron and Neville. The unconscious Neville had been conjured onto a stretcher, while Ron stood anxiously beside him, his face lighting with relief at the sight of them. "Harry," he exclaimed, then faltered at the boy's unconscious state. "Is he?" "He will recover," Dumbledore assured him. "As will Mr. Longbottom. Both showed tremendous courage tonight." McGonagall's lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval mixed with concern. "Albus, what happened?" Mr. Weasley's explanation was rather disjointed. "A story for another time, Minerva," Dumbledore replied, striding toward the hospital wing with Harry still in his arms. "For now, our young heroes require Poppy's excellent care." Snape's dark eyes followed them, lingering on Hermione with an inscrutable expression that made her shiver. Had he somehow sensed the changes she was making to the timeline? Or was it simply his usual disdain for Gryffindors who broke rules? The hospital wing was a flurry of activity as Madame Pomfrey clucked over Harry and Neville, administering potions and conducting diagnostic spells. Ron received treatment for minor injuries sustained during the chess game, while Hermione, physically unharmed, sat quietly on a bed, observing it all. "Miss Granger," came Dumbledore's gentle voice beside her. "A word, if I may." She followed him to a quiet corner of the hospital wing, heart hammering against her ribs. This private conversation hadn't happened in their original timeline. "Sir?" she asked, striving to sound like a normal, albeit precocious, 11-year-old. Dumbledore studied her over his half-moon spectacles, his blue eyes lacking their usual twinkle. "I find myself intensely curious about your role in tonight's events." Professor Snape's challenge, in particular, was designed to allow only one person forward, the one who drank the specific potion in the smallest bottle. Hermione swallowed hard. found an alternative approach, sir. So it would seem. His gaze intensified. Just as you have consistently found alternative approaches throughout this year, demonstrating knowledge and abilities well beyond what one would expect from a first-year student, regardless of natural talent. She remained silent, unsure how to respond without revealing too much. The fire-freezing charm you used on the black flames, Dumbledore continued quietly, is not taught until third year, at the earliest. The disillusionment charm you employed against Professor Quirrell is typically mastered by 6th or 7th years. The shield charm capable of deflecting even partially formed unforgivable curses requires exceptional power and precision. Hermione's blood ran cold. He had either arrived earlier than she realized or had some means of observing what had transpired in the chamber. "I read ahead, sir," she whispered, the explanation sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Indeed." Dumbledore's tone remained mild, but his eyes never left hers. "And your guidance of Harry toward understanding Quirrell's connection to Voldemort? Your preparation of your friends with precisely the spells they would need for each challenge? Your knowledge of the mirror of Erist's inscription without ever having seen it?" He knew. Or at least, he suspected. "Professor, not here," Dumbledore interrupted gently. "Not now. Harry will wake soon, and this is his moment, his victory. But afterwards, Miss Granger, I believe we have much to discuss about the nature of time and consequence." With that cryptic statement, he returned to Harry's bedside, leaving Hermione frozen with apprehension. Dumbledore's suspicions had awakened far earlier than she'd anticipated. Another ripple with unpredictable effects. The following 3 days passed in a blur of whispered rumors and concerned visits to the hospital wing. Harry remained unconscious, just as he had in their original timeline, while Neville recovered more quickly, awaking the morning after their adventure with a headache but no lasting damage. The tale of their journey through the trapdoor spread throughout Hogwarts, growing more elaborate with each retelling. Hermione split her time between sitting at Harry's bedside and fielding questions from curious classmates. The story had significant differences from their original timeline: Neville's involvement, Ron's conscious choice to stay behind, and most importantly, Hermione's presence during Harry's confrontation with Quirrell/Voldemort. The ripples were becoming public knowledge, altering perceptions and relationships in ways she hadn't foreseen. "Everyone's calling you the Brilliant Four," Lavender Brown informed her during breakfast on the third day. "Like the Three Musketeers, but with magic." In their original timeline, they'd been the Golden Trio, a name that hadn't emerged until much later. Now, Neville was included in their core group from the beginning, potentially changing countless future interactions. When Harry finally awoke, Dumbledore was waiting at his bedside, just as he had been in their original timeline. Hermione, Ron, and Neville were shooed out by Madame Pomfrey for the duration of this conversation, which Hermione knew would include revelations about Harry's mother's protection and the nature of love magic. But after Dumbledore departed, when they were finally allowed back in to see Harry, Hermione discovered another significant deviation. "Dumbledore told me you were there, Hermione," Harry said, propping himself up on his pillows. "That you fought Quirrell alongside me." "Not alongside, exactly," she demurred. "I just helped a bit." "He said you saved my life," Harry persisted. "That without you, Voldemort's spirit might have." He trailed off, shuddering. "Well, anyway. Thank you." In their original timeline, Harry had never known she tried to follow him. The confrontation had remained solely his, cementing his role as the central hero of their adventures. This change, the acknowledgement of her direct involvement, shifted the dynamic subtly but significantly. "We all helped," Ron interjected, unexpectedly modest. "Neville was brilliant with the devil's snare and sacrificing himself in the chess game. Hermione solved all the logical parts and apparently dueled Quirrell. And Harry actually destroyed him with his bare hands. That's the point, isn't it?" Neville said quietly. "We all had different parts to play. None of us could have done it alone." It was a profound observation from the once timid boy, and Hermione felt a surge of pride mixed with anxiety. Their friendship was developing stronger bonds earlier, with Neville integrated from the beginning. How would this affect the trials they would face in the years to come? The end-of-term feast brought another deviation. In their original timeline, Dumbledore had awarded last-minute points to Gryffindor, overturning Slytherin's victory in a manner that, Hermione had later realized, was somewhat questionable in its fairness. This time, things unfolded differently. Gryffindor was already leading the House Cup standings, their consistent teamwork throughout the year having earned them steady points even before their adventure beneath the trapdoor. But Dumbledore still rose to make a special announcement. "Before we begin our feast, I have some last-minute points to award," he declared, smiling benevolently at the student body. "Recent events have demonstrated extraordinary qualities from certain students that deserve recognition." The Great Hall fell silent, all eyes on the headmaster. First, to Mr. Ronald Weasley, for the finest played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, and for placing the safety of his injured friend above his own desire for adventure, I award Gryffindor 30 points. Ron's ears turned bright red as Percy could be heard telling anyone who would listen, "My brother, you know. My youngest brother." Second, to Mr. Neville Longbottom, for knowledge perfectly applied in a crisis, and for the courage to sacrifice himself for his friends, a true embodiment of Gryffindor spirit, 30 points. Neville gaped in astonishment as the Gryffindor table erupted in cheers. In their original timeline, he'd received just 10 points for standing up to them, not 30 for joining them. Another significant shift. Third, to Miss Hermione Granger, for cool logic in the face of fire, extraordinary magical aptitude beyond her years, and unwavering loyalty even in the face of mortal danger, 40 points. The Gryffindor table's cheers reached a deafening volume. 40 points, not 50 as in their original timeline. But somehow the recognition of her loyalty and magical skill, rather than just her logical thinking, felt more meaningful. And finally, Dumbledore continued, to Mr. Harry Potter, for pure nerve, outstanding courage, and confronting the darkest of evils with nothing but love and bravery, 50 points. The Great Hall exploded with noise as students calculated the new totals. Gryffindor had not merely edged past Slytherin but soundly defeated them by a margin that couldn't be disputed as a headmaster's favoritism. "The cup is ours," Fred Weasley shouted, standing on his seat. "No contest." As the Gryffindor table celebrated their victory, Hermione caught Dumbledore watching her with that same penetrating gaze. The message was clear, their promised conversation still awaited. It came sooner than she expected. As the feast concluded and students began filing out of the Great Hall, a small school owl fluttered down to Hermione, dropping a sealed note before her plate. "Miss Granger, please join me in my office at your earliest convenience. The password is Sherbet Lemon." "Albus Dumbledore, what's that?" Ron asked, attempting to peer over her shoulder. "Nothing important," she replied, tucking the note away. "Just a question about my exam results, I think. I'll see you in the common room later." As she made her way to Dumbledore's office, Hermione's mind raced with possible approaches. How much should she reveal? How much did he already suspect? The timeline had already deviated significantly from her original experience. Would confiding in Dumbledore accelerate those changes beyond her ability to manage them? The gargoyle sprang aside at the password, and Hermione ascended the spiral staircase with her heart in her throat. Dumbledore was waiting for her, seated behind his desk with his hands folded before him. "Miss Granger," he greeted her warmly. "Thank you for coming so promptly. Please, sit down." She perched nervously on the edge of the chair opposite his desk. "You wanted to see me, Professor?" "Indeed." Dumbledore studied her for a long moment before continuing. "I find myself with questions about you, Miss Granger. Questions that have accumulated throughout this year, culminating in your rather extraordinary performance beneath the trapdoor." Hermione remained silent, uncertain how to respond. "Your professors have all remarked upon your exceptional abilities," Dumbledore continued. Professor Flitwick believes you demonstrate the magical understanding of a third or fourth-year student. Professor McGonagall notes that your transfiguration work displays theoretical comprehension beyond Newt level, though your practical execution remains limited by your magical core's development. He leaned forward slightly. But what intrigues me most is not your academic prowess, impressive though it may be. Rather, it is your foreknowledge. Your apparent ability to anticipate events before they occur and prepare accordingly. The silence that followed was heavy with expectation. Hermione weighed her options carefully before speaking. Sir, she began hesitantly, if someone had knowledge of future events, would changing them be wrong? Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. An interesting hypothetical question, Miss Granger. The ethics of temporal intervention have been debated by wizards far older and presumably wiser than myself, without clear consensus. But you must have an opinion, sir, she pressed gently. He considered this, stroking his long silver beard thoughtfully. I believe that knowledge of the future carries with it tremendous responsibility. The temptation to change events, particularly tragic ones, would be nearly irresistible. And yet, each change creates unforeseen consequences, ripples that become waves, altering the very fabric of time in ways that may ultimately cause more harm than good. It was precisely the dilemma Hermione had been grappling with for months. But surely some changes would be worth the risk, she argued, forgetting momentarily to maintain her facade of ordinary 11-year-old curiosity. Saving lives, preventing suffering, at what cost, Miss Granger? Dumbledore interrupted gently. What if saving one life results in the loss of 10 others? What if preventing one tragedy enables a greater catastrophe? The future is not a tapestry from which individual threads can be plucked without affecting the whole design. His piercing blue eyes met hers. But we are speaking hypothetically, are we not? Hermione swallowed hard. The moment of decision had arrived sooner than she'd anticipated. Should she confide in Dumbledore? Would his wisdom and power be assets in her quest to change the timeline, or would he become an obstacle, insisting on the natural course of events for the greater good? Not entirely hypothetically, Professor, she admitted finally, choosing her words with extreme care. I have knowledge. Knowledge I shouldn't have at my age. Knowledge of events that may come to pass. Dumbledore's expression remained calm, though his eyes sharpened with interest. I see. And this knowledge, might I inquire as to its source? Here, Hermione hesitated again. The full truth, that she was a 30-year-old consciousness inhabiting her 11-year-old body after dying in a future timeline, seemed too fantastic, too potentially destabilizing. But a partial truth might suffice. I experience visions, sir, she said slowly. Detailed, precise glimpses of potential futures. They began shortly before I received my Hogwarts letter. At first, I thought they were just unusual dreams, but then events began unfolding exactly as I'd seen them. It wasn't entirely a lie, she did have visions of a sort, memories of a future that had been her lived experience. Most interesting, Dumbledore murmured. Genuine seers are exceedingly rare, Miss Granger, and their visions typically come in short, cryptic bursts. What you describe sounds more like. He trailed off, studying her with renewed intensity. Like time travel, she suggested quietly. A flicker of surprise crossed his features before his expression became carefully neutral again. An astute hypothesis. The Department of Mysteries has studied temporal phenomena extensively, but even their most sophisticated time-turners permit travel of only a few hours into the past, not years of foreknowledge. Unless something went wrong, Hermione ventured. A magical accident, perhaps. Dumbledore steepled his fingers, regarding her thoughtfully. Miss Granger, if, hypothetically, you possessed knowledge of future events, what would you intend to do with such information? Save lives, she answered without hesitation. Prevent a war. Stop Voldemort from returning to power. Her use of Voldemort's name didn't startle Dumbledore this time, but the substance of her statement clearly did. You believe Lord Voldemort will return? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. I know he will, Hermione replied firmly. Tonight was just his first attempt. There will be others. Silence fell between them as Dumbledore processed this declaration. Hermione could almost see the brilliant mind behind those twinkling blue eyes reassessing everything he knew about her. Miss Granger, he said finally, I find myself in an unusual position. If what you suggest is true, if you indeed possess foreknowledge of events that have not yet come to pass, then you represent both a remarkable opportunity and a significant danger. Danger, sir, she echoed. The danger of unintended consequences, he clarified. Even the wisest among us cannot predict all outcomes of our actions. Changing the future based on foreknowledge may seem straightforward, but time has a way of resisting manipulation. Events prevented in one form often manifest in another, sometimes worse than the original. It was a warning Hermione had considered herself, many times during sleepless nights. But some changes must be worth the risk, she insisted. Some lives must be worth saving, even if it alters the timeline. Dumbledore's expression softened. Who did you lose, Miss Granger? In this future you claim to foresee? The unexpected question caught her off guard. Too many, she whispered before she could stop herself. Fred Weasley. Remus Lupin. Sirius Black. Cedric Diggory. Colin Creevey. Lavender Brown. Alastor Moody. She hesitated, then added softly, you. Surprise flickered in Dumbledore's eyes at the mention of his own death. I see, he said quietly. And these deaths, they were connected to Lord Voldemort's return. Most of them, Hermione confirmed. There's a war coming, Professor. Unless things change. Dumbledore was silent for a long moment, his expression troubled. These are grave matters, Miss Granger. If what you say is true, and I am not yet convinced it is, then we must proceed with extreme caution. You don't believe me? Hermione couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. It is not a question of belief, Dumbledore replied gently. Rather, it is a matter of verification. There are ways to confirm genuine foreknowledge, predictions of specific events that could not possibly be guessed or inferred from current circumstances. I've already changed things, Hermione admitted. The timeline is already different in small ways from what I foresaw. But the major events, Voldemort's attempts to return, the opening of the Chamber of Secrets, the Triwizard Tournament, the prophecy in the Department of Mysteries, those are likely still to come. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose at the specific references. The Chamber of Secrets. You believe it will be opened again? Next year, Hermione said firmly. By a diary containing a fragment of Voldemort's 16-year-old self. It will possess a student and use them to release the basilisk. Students will be petrified, I was one of them in my vision. It felt strange to describe her lived experience as a vision, but it seemed safer than revealing the full truth of her temporal displacement. Dumbledore's expression grew grave. A diary containing a fragment of Voldemort. He murmured, almost to himself. Yes, that would explain. I had suspected, but this confirms. He seemed to be processing information that connected to his own private theories. After a moment, he refocused on Hermione. Miss Granger, I propose a compromise. I will not dismiss your claims outright, but neither can I endorse unsupervised attempts to change the timeline based on unverified foreknowledge. Instead, I suggest you share specific predictions with me, events you believe will occur in the near future. If these come to pass as you describe, we can discuss more extensive interventions. It wasn't the full acceptance and alliance Hermione had hoped for, but it was a start. That seems reasonable, Professor. Excellent. Dumbledore smiled gently. Perhaps you might begin with events you expect to occur over the summer or early in the next school year. Hermione considered carefully. What near-future event would be specific enough to convince Dumbledore without potentially endangering anyone if left to unfold? Harry will be visited by a house elf named Dobby before his birthday, she began. Dobby belongs to the Malfoy family and will warn Harry not to return to Hogwarts because of the danger coming with the Chamber of Secrets. When Harry refuses to promise he won't return, Dobby will use magic in the house, causing Harry to receive an official warning for underage sorcery and getting him in trouble with his aunt and uncle. The specificity of this prediction clearly impressed Dumbledore. Interesting. And this will occur in late July? Hermione nodded. Around the 31st, Harry's birthday. But sir, in my visions. Harry's relatives then lock him in his room with bars on the window. Ron and his brothers have to rescue him with a flying car. Couldn't we prevent that part, at least? It doesn't change any major future events. Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. If your prediction about the house elf proves accurate, we might arrange a more appropriate intervention on Harry's behalf. His eyes twinkled suddenly. I've been meaning to have a direct conversation with the Dursleys regarding their treatment of their nephew for some time. Thank you, sir, Hermione said, relief flooding through her. This was exactly the kind of small, targeted change she had hoped to make, improving Harry's immediate circumstances without drastically altering the timeline's major events. Is there anything else you wish to share at this time? Dumbledore inquired. Hermione hesitated, then decided to offer one more significant piece of information. Sir, Voldemort created objects called Horcruxes, vessels containing fragments of his soul. That's why he didn't truly die when the killing curse rebounded from Harry. The diary I mentioned is one of them. There are others. Dumbledore's face paled visibly. You are certain of this? Absolutely, Hermione confirmed. In my visions, you spend years researching them, hunting them. The ring belonging to his grandfather, Marvolo Gaunt. Slytherin's locket. Hufflepuff's cup. Ravenclaw's diadem. His snake, Nagini. And... She hesitated, uncertain whether to reveal the final, devastating truth about Harry. And... Dumbledore prompted gently. And Harry himself, she finished quietly. A fragment attached itself to him the night his parents died. That's why he can speak Parseltongue, why his scar hurts when Voldemort is near. In my vision, Harry had to die to destroy that fragment, though he survived because of complex magical circumstances involving the Elder Wand and sacrificial magic. Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly, an expression of profound sorrow crossing his features. I had feared as much, he murmured. The connection between them, the similarities. Yes, it explains a great deal. Opening his eyes again, he fixed Hermione with an intensely serious gaze. Miss Granger, if what you have told me is true, and I am increasingly inclined to believe it may be, then you possess knowledge of inestimable value. Knowledge that could save many lives and prevent tremendous suffering, but also knowledge that, if acted upon incorrectly, could lead to unforeseen disasters. I understand, sir, Hermione said solemnly. That's why I've been so careful, making only small changes, trying to prepare Harry and the others without revealing too much. A wise approach, Dumbledore acknowledged. But moving forward, I would ask that you consult with me before making significant interventions. Two minds, particularly when one has considerably more experience with the vagaries of powerful magic, may find safer paths than one alone. It was a reasonable request, though Hermione felt a twinge of apprehension about surrendering her autonomy in managing the timeline. Still, having Dumbledore as an ally rather than an obstacle would be invaluable. I agree, Professor, she said finally. But please understand, there are some events that must happen for Harry to develop the strength and character he'll need. Protecting him from every hardship would leave him unprepared for his ultimate confrontation with Voldemort. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with renewed appreciation. A most insightful observation, Miss Granger. The crucible of adversity does indeed forge the strongest steel. He leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. I believe we understand each other. As Hermione left Dumbledore's office, descending the spiral staircase with a lighter heart than when she'd ascended it, she felt cautiously optimistic. Having the headmaster's conditional support, provided her predictions proved accurate, would make her task of guiding the timeline infinitely easier. But as she reached the bottom of the stairs, an unexpected figure emerged from the shadows of the corridor, Professor Snape, his dark eyes glittering with suspicion. "Miss Granger," he said silkily. "A private audience with the headmaster on the final evening of term." "How interesting." "Good evening, Professor," Hermione replied, striving to sound casual. Professor Dumbledore had some questions about the events under the trapdoor. Snape's lip curled slightly. "Did he indeed? And I suppose he was particularly interested in your unprecedented mastery of advanced magic well beyond the capabilities of a first-year student?" Hermione's breath caught. Had Snape been eavesdropping on her conversation with Dumbledore? "I read ahead, sir," she said, falling back on her standard explanation. "So you maintain," Snape replied, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "But even the most precocious student does not independently discover and master spells taught exclusively in Newt-level courses. Unless, perhaps, they have had additional instruction." Hermione frowned in genuine confusion. "Additional instruction, sir?" Snape leaned closer, his expression intense. "The dark arts leave traces, Miss Granger. Magical signatures that those with the proper training can detect. The spell you cast in the chamber, the one that repelled Quirrell, bore such a signature." Horror flooded through Hermione as she realized what he was implying. In her original timeline, she had learned certain defensive spells during their hunt for Horcruxes, spells from books on the edge of dark magic, necessary for survival in desperate times. The muscle memory of those spells had apparently carried over into her younger body, influencing her casting style in the moment of crisis. "I don't practice dark arts, Professor," she said firmly. "I would never." "Perhaps not knowingly," Snape conceded, still watching her closely. "But magical knowledge has a way of accumulating from unexpected sources. Books with questionable content find their way into young hands. Spells are overheard and repeated without understanding their nature." He straightened, his tall form looming over her. "Consider this a warning, Miss Granger. Whatever the source of your unusual abilities, I will be watching closely for signs of dangerous influence. Gryffindor's newest celebrity may have the headmaster's indulgence, but my responsibility is to the safety of this school and its students." With a swirl of his black robes, he turned and strode away, leaving Hermione frozen in the corridor, her optimism thoroughly doused. Snape's suspicion was an unexpected complication, one she hadn't anticipated in her careful planning. The ripples of her changes were spreading wider, creating waves she couldn't control. Now they had attracted the attention of not just Dumbledore, but Snape as well, and possibly others she wasn't yet aware of. As she made her way back to Gryffindor Tower, Hermione's mind raced with new concerns and considerations. She would need to be more careful with her spell usage, more conscious of the magical techniques she employed. The knowledge and muscle memory from her original timeline were assets, but they also created patterns that observant wizards like Snape might recognize as incongruous in a first-year student. The common room was packed with students celebrating the end of term and their House Cup victory. Fred and George had somehow acquired butterbeer and sweets from the kitchens, and music played from a magical wireless in the corner. Harry, released from the hospital wing that afternoon, sat by the fire with Ron and Neville, looking tired but happy. "There she is," Ron called as Hermione entered. "We were wondering where you'd disappeared to." Just sorting out some final details with Professor McGonagall, she lied smoothly, joining them by the fire. "How are you feeling, Harry?" "Better," he replied, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. "Madame Pomfrey wanted to keep me another day, but I convinced her I'd rest just as well here. Didn't want to miss the last night." Neville grinned. Besides, how could he miss the celebration? "We're heroes now, apparently." The casual inclusiveness of his statement, "we're heroes," was another reminder of how her changes were altering relationships and identities. In their original timeline, Neville's heroism hadn't been acknowledged until much later. "Hardly heroes," Hermione demurred. "We just did what anyone would have done in the circumstances." "Rubbish," Ron countered. "Not everyone would face a three-headed dog, killer plants, homicidal chess pieces, and you-know-who himself on the back of a teacher's head. We did something pretty extraordinary, and everyone knows it." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and Hermione realized another subtle change to the timeline. Ron's confidence, his sense of self-worth, was developing earlier and on a healthier foundation than in their original experience. The strategic changes she'd made to include him more, to validate his contributions, were bearing fruit. "I suppose you're right," she conceded with a small smile. It was rather extraordinary. As the celebration continued around them, Hermione found herself studying her friends with new awareness. Harry, still carrying the burden of his connection to Voldemort but now with stronger friendships and better preparation for what lay ahead. Ron, more secure in his own value, less overshadowed by his brothers and Harry's fame. Neville, already developing the confidence and courage that had taken years to emerge in their original timeline. The ripples of her changes were reshaping them all, for better or worse. The following morning brought the usual end-of-term flurry of activity, trunks being packed, last-minute items recovered from around the castle, tearful goodbyes between friends. Hermione managed her preparations efficiently, her mind still preoccupied with her conversations with Dumbledore and Snape. As they boarded the Hogwarts Express, she found herself unusually quiet, lost in thought about the summer ahead and the challenges of second year that would follow. The Chamber of Secrets. The Basilisk. Tom Riddle's diary. In their original timeline, she had been petrified for weeks, missing crucial developments. This time, she intended to avoid that fate while still ensuring the essential events unfolded as needed. "You're awfully quiet," Harry observed as their train compartment rattled through the countryside. "Thinking about home?" "Among other things," Hermione admitted. "It's been an eventful year, hasn't it?" "That's one way of putting it," Ron snorted. "Almost killed multiple times, faced you-know-who, and still managed to pass our exams." "Well, most of us." He grinned good-naturedly at Neville, who had struggled with his potions final despite Hermione's tutoring. "I passed everything else, though," Neville pointed out proudly. "Even Transfiguration, which I thought I'd fail for sure." "We all did brilliantly," Hermione agreed, feeling a surge of pride in her friends. "And next year will be even better." Harry's expression turned thoughtful. "Do you think Voldemort will try again? To come back?" The compartment fell silent at the direct question. Hermione chose her words carefully, aware of the fine line between preparing them and revealing too much. "I think we have to assume he will," she replied. "He's been trying for 10 years. He won't give up just because one plan failed." "But he can't get to the stone anymore," Ron pointed out. "Dumbledore will have hidden it somewhere else, won't he?" Hermione hesitated. In their original timeline, Dumbledore had destroyed the stone after the confrontation with Quirrell. Would he do the same this time, now that he had her predictions about Horcruxes to consider? "I'm not sure the stone matters anymore," she said slowly. "Voldemort will find another way. He always does." "Then we'll stop him again," Harry said with quiet determination. "Whatever he tries next." The simple confidence in his statement warmed Hermione's heart. Despite everything he had endured, would endure, Harry's fundamental courage and goodness remained constant across timelines. "Yes," she agreed softly. "We will." As the train neared London, their conversation turned to summer plans. Ron invited Harry to visit the Burrow later in the holiday. Neville spoke enthusiastically about a rare plant his grandmother had promised to help him cultivate. Normal, happy discussions that made the darkness ahead seem temporarily distant. But as Platform 9 3/4 came into view, Hermione felt a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility. The coming year would bring new dangers, new choices, new opportunities to shape the timeline for the better. She had made it through her first year again, with significant changes already rippling outward. Dumbledore was now aware of at least part of her unusual situation. Snape suspected something was amiss. Her friendship circle had expanded to include Neville from the beginning. Harry had faced Voldemort with more knowledge and support than in their original timeline. Small changes creating larger waves. Shifting foundations beneath the structure of time itself. As they disembarked onto the crowded platform, Hermione hugged each of her friends tightly. "Write to me," she insisted. "All of you. And be careful this summer." "Careful of what?" Ron asked, looking bemused. "I'm just going home to the Burrow." Hermione managed a smile, thinking of the flying Ford Anglia and the Chamber of Secrets that awaited in their original timeline. "Just a feeling," she said lightly. "Promise you'll stay in touch." They all promised, and as they separated to find their families, Hermione spotted her parents waiting beyond the barrier. The sight of them, alive and well and intact in their memories, brought tears to her eyes. Another chance to protect them, to find a better solution than the memory charms that had ultimately destroyed her mother in her original timeline. "Ready for home, sweetheart?" her father asked, embracing her warmly. "Yes," Hermione replied, though home had become a complicated concept across multiple timelines and lives. "I've missed you both so much." As they drove away from King's Cross, Hermione gazed out the window at the London streets, her mind already planning for the year ahead. The Chamber of Secrets. The Basilisk. Ginny Weasley's possession by the diary. Dobby's attempts to save Harry. Lockhart's fraudulent teachings. So many events to navigate, to manage, to subtly redirect without losing the essential threads that would eventually lead to Voldemort's final defeat. But she wasn't alone anymore. Dumbledore, however cautiously, had acknowledged her foreknowledge. Her friends were stronger, better prepared, more unified than in their original first year. The foundations were shifting, but perhaps, just perhaps, they were shifting toward a better future, one with fewer sacrifices, less suffering, more hope. As London gave way to suburbs and then countryside, Hermione made a silent promise to herself. She would continue her careful interventions, her strategic ripples. She would save as many lives as possible without compromising the ultimate victory they needed to achieve. And if unexpected waves arose from her actions, like Snape's suspicions or Neville's earlier inclusion in their core group, she would adapt, adjust, find new paths forward. That was, after all, what she had always done best. In this timeline and the last, Hermione Granger was nothing if not adaptable. The future, and the past, were counting on it. Summer passed in a blur of careful planning and strategic communication. Hermione wrote regular letters to Harry, Ron, and Neville, subtly preparing them for the year ahead without revealing too much. To Harry, she sent tips for managing his difficult relatives and a warning to watch for unusual house guests, thinking of Dobby. To Ron, she included casual questions about his sister Ginny, who would be starting Hogwarts that fall and was destined to become the Basilisk's unwitting accomplice. To Neville, she provided encouragement for his summer herbology project, knowing his confidence in this area would be crucial in years to come. She also exchanged several carefully worded letters with Dumbledore, providing more detailed predictions about the Chamber of Secrets and the diary that would possess Ginny. The headmaster's responses were non-committal but intrigued, suggesting he was taking her information seriously while reserving final judgment until her predictions could be verified. In late July, exactly as Hermione had foretold, Harry received an official warning for underage magic after Dobby's visit. But unlike in their original timeline, Dumbledore intervened personally, appearing at Privet Drive to have what he described in his letter to Hermione as a most illuminating conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Dursley regarding their legal and moral obligations to their nephew. The result was a marked improvement in Harry's treatment for the remainder of the summer, not warmth or affection from his relatives, but an absence of the outright cruelty and neglect that had characterized his childhood. Another small but significant change to the timeline. August brought school supplies lists and preparations for the new term. Hermione arranged to meet Harry, Ron, and the Weasleys in Diagon Alley, knowing that in their original timeline, this visit had included Harry's first encounter with Lucius Malfoy, the man who would slip Tom Riddle's diary into Ginny's cauldron. The day in Diagon Alley unfolded much as she remembered, with one crucial addition: Dumbledore, supposedly there on routine school business, contrived to be present during their visit to Flourish and Blots, where Gilderoy Lockhart was holding his book signing. Miss Granger, the headmaster, greeted her with a meaningful look as the crowded bookshop prepared for Lockhart's entrance. What a fortunate coincidence. I was just speaking with Arthur Weasley about his fascinating work with Muggle artifacts. Hermione understood immediately. Dumbledore was positioning himself to observe the interaction she had predicted between Arthur Weasley and Lucius Malfoy, the moment when the diary would be planted in Ginny's cauldron. Sure enough, the events played out almost exactly as Hermione remembered: Lockhart's grandiose entrance, his insistence on a photograph with Harry, Draco Malfoy's sneering commentary, and finally, Lucius Malfoy's cold confrontation with Arthur Weasley. But this time, as Lucius reached into Ginny's cauldron to examine her second-hand copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration, Dumbledore drifted casually closer. "Lucius," the headmaster said pleasantly. "How unexpected to find you browsing standard school texts. Draco is quite well supplied already, I imagine." Malfoy's hand froze momentarily, the diary he had been about to slip into the cauldron still concealed within Ginny's Transfiguration book. His cold grey eyes flicked to Dumbledore, then to Hermione, who was watching the interaction intently. "Merely examining the quality of education Hogwarts now provides," Malfoy replied smoothly, returning Ginny's book to her cauldron without the diary. "Standards seem to be slipping by the year." "On the contrary," Dumbledore replied, his blue eyes twinkling though his expression remained serious. "I find our students consistently rise to meet the highest expectations. Some demonstrate quite extraordinary abilities." His gaze shifted briefly to Hermione, who felt a flush rise in her cheeks. Lucius noticed the glance, his own eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her. "The Granger girl," he said softly. "Yes, Draco has mentioned her. Quite precocious, I understand. For her background." The contempt in his tone was unmistakable, but Hermione met his gaze steadily, knowing what this man would become in the years ahead: a Death Eater, a torturer, a servant to Voldemort who would one day stand by while she was brutalized on the floor of his own drawing room. "Miss Granger is indeed a credit to Hogwarts," Dumbledore said firmly. "As I'm sure Draco could be, with the right guidance." The veiled warning in his words was not lost on Malfoy, whose lips thinned to a barely visible line. With a curt nod, he placed a hand on Draco's shoulder and steered him toward the exit, their planned confrontation with the Weasleys aborted. As they departed, Hermione caught a glimpse of something small and black partially protruding from Lucius's elegant cloak pocket, the diary, still in his possession. "A most interesting interaction," Dumbledore murmured, suddenly beside her. "Your prediction was remarkably accurate, Miss Granger, though the outcome appears to have been altered by my presence. A demonstration of the butterfly effect you've been concerned about." Hermione nodded, her mind racing with implications. "The diary, he still has it. He didn't plant it in Ginny's cauldron." "Indeed not," Dumbledore agreed, his expression grave. "Which raises the question, what will Lucius Malfoy do with Tom Riddle's diary now?" It was a question Hermione couldn't answer with certainty. In preventing one critical event from their original timeline, Ginny's possession by the diary, they had created an entirely new branch of possibilities. "He'll still try to get it into Hogwarts somehow," she said after a moment's thought. "The diary is designed to open the Chamber of Secrets and release the basilisk. That was Voldemort's plan, and Lucius is committed to carrying it out." "Then we must be vigilant," Dumbledore replied. "Every student's belongings will be carefully screened upon arrival at Hogwarts, without their knowledge. If the diary attempts to enter the school, we will intercept it." It seemed a reasonable precaution, but Hermione couldn't shake a sense of unease. The timeline was deviating more significantly now, moving into uncharted territory. Without Ginny as the diary's vessel, who might become its new target? How would the Chamber of Secrets be opened, if at all? As they left Flourish and Blots to rejoin the others, Hermione's gaze fell on Ginny Weasley, shy, bright-eyed, innocent Ginny, who in their original timeline had suffered the terrible trauma of possession by Voldemort's soul fragment. At least that fate had been averted. Whatever new challenges arose, saving Ginny from that experience seemed worth the uncertainty ahead. "Something on your mind, Miss Granger?" Dumbledore asked quietly as they walked. "Just, ripples becoming waves," she replied. "We've changed something significant today. I'm not sure what will happen now." Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. "The future is always uncertain, whether we attempt to alter it or not. The question is not whether we can control all outcomes, we cannot, but whether we act with wisdom and compassion in the face of what we do know." It was classic Dumbledore, profound, slightly enigmatic, and not entirely reassuring. But as they rejoined the Weasleys and Harry, watching their animated discussions about Quidditch and new school supplies, Hermione felt a renewed sense of purpose. The foundations were shifting beneath them all, the timeline bending into new configurations. But the core of what mattered, their friendship, their courage, their determination to stand against the darkness, remained intact. Whatever came next, they would face it together. In this timeline, as in the last. The game had changed, but the stakes remained the same: lives to be saved, a war to be prevented, a future to be rewritten. And Hermione Granger, time traveler and guardian of the timeline, would be ready. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.